So I go, hey, bear, hey. I try to scare it away. The second I made a noise, the bear turned and ran down the mountain right towards me. And it proceeded to follow me in like 40 to 30 yards away from me, just weaving back and forth across the trail, trying to head me off, but I was just boogieing in front of it. So I ran up and grabbed my stuff. I tried to scare the bear away. Now I'm packing all my stuff back. I get back to where the ram is. And the ram, where I had cleaned it was in like a little opening that was probably 30 meters wide. And I just sat there with my bow ready and my bear spray ready. And I was like, that bear is gonna come, and I'm just gonna have to shoot this grizzly.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch!
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wild Dispatch. I'm Robin and I'm back with more skills and stories from the wild. We have another fantastic guest today, Adam Brennan. I can honestly say I think Adam is capable of pushing himself harder than most human beings. I don't know exactly what it is that's clicked in his brain, but it was clear pretty quickly from the moment I met him that the way he thinks and the way he operates and the way he's capable of pushing himself to achieve a goal is something quite special. As a result, he has some pretty incredible stories and also a technical way of thinking about problems and how to solve them too. So that combo means that he's done some pretty remarkable stuff in his life. He lives in the Yukon in Canada, which is actually a country not too far away from Alaska, if I understand correctly. And yeah, in that wilderness, he gets out and he chases some pretty incredible animals with nothing more than a traditional bow. Now, bow hunting is always hard, no matter what. I can say that from experience, using a compound bow is a pretty tough challenge getting in close to animals. But the thing is, once you put down a compound bow and pick up a traditional bow, everything instantly gets so much harder. You've got to get much, much closer. You don't have a sighting system. You don't have any of that stuff. So ultimately, you need to be getting within 20, 25 yards of an animal to be sure that you're actually going to make an ethical kill. So with that all in mind, Adam embraces this difficulty and has done for many, many years in his life in just some of the most extreme conditions you can imagine. I want to say a big thank you to Adam for sharing his time and his knowledge and all of his wisdom today. I also want to say a big thank you to everyone who's listening. It is always very helpful if you can just give a like, a follow, a subscribe, do all the things that people who enjoy podcasts do. It will help with the algorithms. It'll push things up in the thingamajiggies, whatever they're called, so that people can get it more easily. So it will arrive on their feed. Oh, I don't know if you can hear that, but there is an oak tree dropping very large acorns on a tin roof here in South Africa. So if you're wondering what that noise was. I've actually just got back from an amazing hunt in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. Lots of fun had. It was very hot and humid at this time of year, given that it's the Southern Hemisphere, but we made up for it. So yeah, it was incredible. Had some really close encounters, spent a lot of time very close to some amazing animals. So yeah, let's just say from this conversation, I'm inspired to now pick up a stick bow and see if I can make it happen with more primitive technology. But that's enough waffling from me. We are not going to be in South Africa for this episode, though. We are going to be in Canada. Here's Adam. Okay. Okay, I don't think there's anything else. I think if you're ready, I'm ready.
I'm ready. I just killed my email and my Teams chat there, so we shouldn't have nothing bothering us.
Binging and dinging in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry it was so challenging to make this happen. I I don't know. I feel like there might be holes in my brain, and yeah. So it's very sorry, but thank you again for your patience with the
No, man.
couple mistakes I made.
I think it was both of us as well. We've been running around
Yeah.
having adventures, doing all kinds of different stuff. So
Yes.
crossing
Yeah.
paths has been it's been a few months, I think, for us to actually kind of sit down together.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Again, sorry about that, but I'm
No,
happy
dude,
we're doing it today.
it's
Yeah.
good. I like it. Beginning with apologies is very kind of it's what a British person would do on my side as well. But you're not British. You're from Canada,
No.
right?
Yeah, I'm Canadian. Often people ask you to define yourself, but I really try not to pigeonhole myself into a certain area. Some people might describe me as, first of all, like I'm a new dad, and like I'm definitely just a average committed husband, married guy. But some people might say that I'm a bow hunter, and I do a specific type of archery, um, using a longbow, sometimes a recurve. So maybe for the context of this chat, yeah, in this aspect of life, I'm a bow hunter from Canada. I live in the Yukon. I was born here. My son is the fifth generation of my family to be born here. Um, we have deep roots in the Yukon, but I left for a little while. I moved to Alberta and finished my school, chased mule deer and elk a bit, and then came back to the Yukon with my wife, where we've kind of settled down into our, you know, comfortable existence, where we, get out on the land, explore the Yukon, and work enough to survive in this economy.
Yeah. So I actually my geography is terrible. So apologies from my side now. But the Yukon, I think I just looked it up, is far like north. I got to do this in my head. West, northwest part of Canada, right? Like it's actually kind of bordering Alaska. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So we share a border with Alaska, from the Arctic Ocean all the way to British Columbia. And then the Alaskan Panhandle kind of comes down, the coast of British Columbia, which is where I do all of my professional work. And then, so the Yukon, for the context of for this discussion, all of the Yukon is landlocked except for a very small section in the very north, um,
Okay.
which is completely inaccessible to 99% of people that live here. To put it in perspective, there's only a few roads in the Yukon. How big is the Yukon? The Yukon, I would say, is probably the same size as Washington and Oregon together, with a little bit of California in it. So,
Wow, that's big.
um, yeah, it's quite large. If I was to drive, often I hunt in the northern part of the Yukon, and I live in southern Yukon, where it's warmer and we have the coastal influence. I live in a town called Whitehorse.
Okay.
It's the capital city of the Yukon, and it's right on the Alaska Highway. Some During the World Wars, a highway was built to connect the lower 48 and Alaska,
Hmm.
in the event that Europe and Asia needed to be accessed or defended from that direction. So we live on the Alaska Highway. All along that highway, there are, historic monuments to people that were building the road. One such place would be out at the Slims River near Kluwani, very, very famous place for Dall sheep. And on some of the placards, you can see the menu of the restaurant, and it's like, moose, burgers, Dall sheep, lamb chops, etc. So that part of our history exists in the Yukon. But to put it in perspective, how large it is, if I was to drive from one side of the Yukon to the other, so east and west across it,
Yeah.
it would probably take me 8 or 9 hours to drive across it at 60 miles an hour.
Wow.
So 60
Okay.
to 70 miles an hour. And then the north-south scale of the Yukon, it takes me 17 hours to drive where I hunt in the north.
Wow.
It takes 17 hours to drive there, and I'm still probably only three-quarters of the way to the ocean.
Wow, that's massive.
So
So that's longer than
yeah,
California, probably, I'd say.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm not intimately familiar with it. I just was trying to think like what
Yeah.
it's huge. It's
Yeah,
huge.
that's
Canada is
massive.
massive and the Yukon is massive as well.
Okay.
Um, One key component of the Yukon is it's very remote. Um, so like I was saying earlier, you have the Alaska Highway that goes across it east-west, roughly. You have one road that goes south to a town called Skagway in Alaska. And then you have another road that goes north to Dawson City, which is famous for the gold rush, and then north again to the Arctic Ocean that way through NWT. There's one other road that connects those two, and then a small road to the north of mine that takes about 7 hours to travel. It's dirt roads the entire way. Imagine if California only had six roads or five roads in it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
So it's very remote, very wild. There's about 42,000 people that live here.
Wow.
And I think our generations before us might say that they live in the heyday of bow hunting. Like a good friend of mine, Bert, who actually made this bow that I thought I'd bring it and show
Oh, cool.
if there was time.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine named Bert Freelink, who made that bow. He's uh almost 70 now. And he said to me that he grew up in the heyday of hunting in Alberta, Canada,
Okay.
which is I think realistically he's accurate in that. Like our parents' generation lived in the heyday of bow hunting when opportunities were rich, landowners were excited to give out permission,
Yes,
and
yeah.
there weren't draws, there weren't hunting draws.
So you could just show up.
Yeah, I live. The Yukon is that place now
Is it?
because
Okay.
it's humongous and available. There's very few hunting draws I have to put in for, right?
Yeah.
The communities are built around hunting. Everybody loves hunters here.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's expansive and I can access any part of it I want. I'm not restricted by small agricultural
Yeah,
farms
yeah.
and cottage
Permissions.
country and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah. So what I respond to him is that I moved to the Yukon. It's the heyday. This is the good old days of bow hunting right now.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it now. You've got to watch out.
Well, I mean,
You're gonna have some new
it's
neighbors.
just the sun just came up and it's 12. The sun came up at noon today
Really?
and it's minus 30 degrees Celsius. So,
Okay.
I
Interest
mean,
now over.
yeah, exactly.
So you were telling me
Hmm.
this already. You've just been, I mean, as we said before, we've had a bunch of kind of often different adventures, situation for the last few months, but we were just talking recently and you actually headed off on a new adventure chasing wood bison, right? Or is it wood buffalo? I don't know what the right term is. What would you call them?
We call they're bison here.
Okay.
So in the Yukon, I remember when I was a little boy, the first ever advertised they were going to do a draw where people could go hunt bison, and nobody was interested in it. And essentially, what it was in the 90s were or late 90s, like 1996 or 97, about the bison all lived on the road, and they were introduced to the Yukon. Um, in an attempt to I'm not sure actually why they introduced them, but I think it's like reestablishing traditional wildlife in an area or creating hunting and harvesting opportunities. So we have elk and bison in the Yukon that may have been brought here for those reasons. But they were very easy to hunt.
Okay.
They were here not millions, look at me. I love archaeology and I love the geological timelines in North America. I
Okay.
almost said millions of years ago, but what I meant to say was tens of thousands of years ago they were
Okay.
here, like,
Okay.
13,000 plus years ago they would have been here. um but they weren't here for a long time and then they were brought back into the Yukon. So
Okay.
what's special about these bison is now it's called a permit hunt, but you don't have to apply for it, you just buy the permit and they're like $5 or something. And but since the 90s the bison have been pushed into what we call the core of their habitat now. So they're quite a long ways from the road, um, and hard to access. So it's very cold. It's kind of very remote, and there aren't a lot of bison around. So maybe a couple hundred of them get killed a year, 200 to 300 bison get killed a year, which would be a lot.
Yeah.
But they're hard to access. So we went out the other day and looked around for them. And for the sake of the podcast, I'll say it was an opportunity to test some machines out early in the year to make sure everything is running well. And also to get out on the land with a friend of mine and his son and daughter.
Okay.
So we didn't go to a very extreme or remote part of the Yukon, but we went to a place that does hold bison. Um, we didn't have success, but we had a great time. But
What was
I
the
have just
temperature?
recently, oh man,
I think you said it was minus
I would say is
30.
yeah. So it was -30 in Whitehorse, but where we were is about -25.
Oh, okay.
So it's
Much
very
nicer.
cold. Yeah,
Balmy.
yeah, yeah. It's very cold here, but I'll tell you this, and your listeners may be interested as well. Growing up in the Yukon, and I'm a climate scientist, so I have to be careful how I describe this, but I'll just speak from my personal experience as a child in the Yukon.
Yeah.
I remember it being brutally cold every single day. For mid-December to mid-February, it would be -20, -30 every single day. Now, what we get are called Chinook winds that come from the ocean and bring warm air. It's -30 today, right now.
Yeah.
And on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the following week from now, so first weeks of January, it will be -1.
Wow.
So we're getting these changes in our climate, so much so that the Yukon was traditionally known as a bit of an arid area, very dry. There's not a lot of moisture, and it shows up in the kind of vegetation we have here.
Yeah.
But now we're getting 400, 500 times the amount of snow in a winter that we typically should be. And we're getting these freeze thaw events. So we're seeing a marked decline. And listeners can look it up. Northern Alaska saw hunting closures they've never seen before. Some people might say that under the Biden administration, they've lost more hunting opportunity than they ever have. But I don't think it's a person that did this. I think it's these warming and cooling events. And I'm sure somebody would want to debate this, but I'm seeing it out even when I'm hunting that we had, several feet of snow. And then we hiked up onto a ridge to look for bison, and there was maybe 2 or 3 inches of snow. What we're seeing is these changes, but it's like a hard pack snow that hides the vegetation away from ungulates. And
Hmm.
I've even seen some sheep annualize forming where they have like stunted years over the last couple of years due to the difficult winters and the snow. So sheep crops are dying off in the mountains. So all the old rams and the subsequent younger rams that are experiencing the fatigue of the late early winter, late fall rut, they go into the winter weakened by that. And
They're on the back foot.
yes, exactly.
So then they get whacked by not having enough food to recover.
Yeah, and then again, what happens is in March, when we usually don't get a lot of snow, these core sheep habitats are getting hammered with snow, maybe 2 or 3 feet of snow in March. So it's like aligning with the lambing season. So some of these animals are seeing loss of habitat through vegetation encroachment,
Yes.
the impacts of snow and weather changes in their region.
We talked about that a bit
Yeah.
before, right? I think maybe it'd be good to go into the little bit more detail about that because I think it was interesting. You're saying about habitat encroachment, but okay, in reality, I guess what that means is areas where there would be a tree line and
Yeah.
suddenly there's obviously
Yeah.
no trees. It's like that is actually climbing at quite a rapid rate at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not a mathematician, so my trigonometry is a little bit weak. But if we were to say, if you have a triangle, i.e., a mountain, and we took a meter of area off of the top of the mountain,
Yeah.
that would be X amount. If we took a meter vertical elevation off of the bottom of that triangle, it'd be many, many factors larger area loss, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So as vegetation encroaches and displaces the grasses that sheep eat, or lichen that caribou eat, they see a loss in their habitat more so than you would actually expect because the larger portion of that habitat is shrinking quicker.
Hmm.
So I would say, what does this all mean? Like, what does this mean? And to me, what it means is I want to hunt sheep for the rest of my life. I want to stay physically fit enough to do it for the rest of my life. So how do I do that? I think my choice was that I would hunt them the hardest way I could. And like we have these sacred archery zones and people want to shoot rams at 120 meters with their compound bow. That's their prerogative.
Hmm.
I'm not going to tell somebody how to live their life. But if we all do that under this marked decline in habitat and sheep populations we're seeing, all we're heading for is a loss of opportunity. Like, do you want to hunt sheep or do you want to kill them? Is a question I think we need to ask ourselves. And personally, I like to hunt them.
Yeah,
And killing them is part of that, but it takes up like in some cases only a few blinks of your eye to make it happen.
a tiny
You know?
percentage.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I think it's also part of that is, at least from my experience, I've always enjoyed doing really hard hunts because that's part of what appeals to me, I guess, maybe as a person, which is maybe why
yeah,
sort of now traditional archery is kind of there lingering as a very appealing thing for me now that I feel I'm getting better at hunting
yeah.
because I'm a relatively new hunter myself. But
I would
it's,
say go for it.
yeah,
And the reason I'd say this is because we live in a secure and kind of somewhat safe society. Um, Maybe the rewards of challenging yourself outweigh the risk of going hungry. Because really there isn't a risk of that.
exactly. Yeah,
For a lot of us.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah.
And I think I definitely experienced that, that when you've done a really kind of hard hunt and worked really hard for a long time towards a goal, it's so much better when you're successful, isn't it? It's just like
Yes.
that sense of achievement is so much higher than if you just rock out
Yeah.
and get something on the first day. I mean, that's
One
nice
thing
too
I
sometimes, but what you can,
yeah. I'll say this. I shot a turkey on a really easy hunt with my longbow. It just happened. It just came out in front of us. It just shot it. I was like, well, this has been like 5 minutes. We've been hunting. And I had this feeling that I like wasn't fulfilled about it, you know?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I called a good friend of mine and I said, hey, I got a turkey, but I'm a little embarrassed. I didn't really have to hunt it very hard. And and I told him, we had just kind of got out of the truck and we were just set up and bam, it happened. I feel like we didn't really, did it just walk up to us or did we have any part in it? Right. And he said to me, he said, Adam, how many times have you put maximum effort in and come home empty and been like that close
yeah,
and it didn't make a difference? Sometimes you just have to be happy that it went your way this time,
yep,
right?
yeah,
So I really appreciated that. But I know that you're interested in two things from me today. Um, Talking about traditional archery,
yeah,
which I'm happy to do,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then maybe talking about how I've used it on hunts in my life. So I'll leave it up to you with which direction you want to go there.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about both those things, but I guess also a little bit more intro would be nice as well. I sometimes like to kind of roll my sleeves up with guests and hear a little bit more about experiences growing up. You said that you grew up in the Yukon, which actually I didn't realize. I think I assumed that you were in Alberta before because I know that you moved from Alberta to the Yukon in our previous conversations. So, at what point did you get into kind of a wild, outdoorsy kind of lifestyle? Was that from a very young age? Was it kind of, were you influenced by your family or how did that work?
So I grew up in a family. I have eight brothers and a sister.
Wow.
We grew up in a very remote part of the world. Um, I would say just imagine children that didn't wear shoes. We were homeschooled, raised pretty religious. Ultimately, now I'm not religious, and hopefully we don't go down that road too far. Um,
Yeah.
then on top of that, we hunted, and I got my first longbow when I was very young. So young, I probably don't even remember how old I was. I just remember it was yellow fiberglass, and we shot it every day. And then on top of that, we hunted, and a lot of my childhood hunting was essentially we would get in a large van because there were so many of us, and we would drive out on this road called the South Canal Road. Um, and we would drive around looking for moose. And it's pretty, at the time, was pretty abundant with moose. So, it was a good it was a good way for my parents to get us all out.
Yeah.
Prior to that, when there was just kind of the four oldest brothers I have, three oldest brothers and one sister, um, they would do like remote river trips and horseback trips and stuff like that. So they were, fairly integrated into hunting. And then there just was way too many kids for us all to go out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that transition. And then I moved away from the Yukon when I was when I was 14 or 15 and finished my high school. In high school, really fell back in love with the idea of archery. As soon as I was, but had transitioned to rifle hunting with my brothers
Okay.
in Alberta, a lot of deer hunting with a rifle. And then um, when I was kind of in my late teens, transitioned back to archery. Kept at it all through basically since my 20 years now. Started to compete with my bow while I was in university. Continued to compete with my bow all the way up until about 2017 when we moved to the Yukon. And then the competition world kind of dried up because there isn't that isn't happening here. And I just basically fell back completely into bow hunting with practicing on my own. I really will say that I only did compete with my bow uh, ever to get better at hunting, and I definitely retained all of my. I would climb out of a tree stand and walk into an archery shoot and not change anything but my field points from broad hits. So
Mm.
I really was pretty strict with myself that I had to shoot exactly the same bow I hunted with because I didn't want to change anything about my setup that would influence my trajectory or point of impact. So I shoot my bow a mix of instinctive, and
Okay.
then when it gets out a little further, it's almost impossible not to see the point come into view.
Yes.
And if I change the energy or the dynamic output of my bow or the weight of my arrow, any of those things, that trajectory will change
Yes.
and it'll change my ability to hit my target. So I always competed with a mid 50s 6 to 60 pound longbow or recurve and 10 grains per pound arrow kind of in that range.
So like a 550 or 600 grain arrow.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
okay, lots of questions. I almost had so many questions pop in my mind that I forgot them all then.
Yeah, that can happen. What I will say is it's not normal to compete with these heavier with that. What was the typical setup for people that I was competing with?
Yeah, yeah.
So probably a takedown recurve, in the mid 30s to low 30 pounds. And they were all more or less shooting gap, which is, putting your point of your arrow on a location that you want the arrow to go and adjusting up or down. So if we think about how an arrow flies through the air, basically the trajectory of the arrow comes up just a bit into where your eye line is
Yeah.
and then stabilizes and then sees the next, like, I don't know if this is parabolic or what, but a rapid decline. And with the way my bow's set up, if I shoot um, 15 to 25 yards, I'm basically in that flat spot,
Perfect.
right?
Yeah.
And then when I get out further and shoot, like let's say 35 yards, the point of my arrow would be right on where that, within, reason, is going to be very close to where the arrow is going to impact the animal.
In terms of like sighting. So that's the thing that's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
quite different for a lot of people. And maybe one of the things that I find a little daunting actually about shifting to traditional archery is that I guess that balance of instinctive and like gap shooting, I think is what you're describing. Those two things, right? Like if you're those two
These are
worlds.
taboo topics. These are kind of taboo topics we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I just I want to say this one more time.
Yeah.
I only shoot my bow to hunt with it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I I don't have an opinion about how you or anybody that we might mutually know shoots their bow and how they sight their bow. I don't have prejudice that they're more accurate because they do it a certain way. If I, let's just, where I hunt in the big mountains,
Yeah.
I shoot very close shots, um, often in fairly severe wind environments, right?
Yeah.
And I shoot a specific way to minimize the opportunity for error that those environmental factors may cause. Why I talk about the mountains, I'm talking about cliffs for
Yes.
steep shots,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I'm talking about high wind situations, so we need a really stable arrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I want a broadhead that cuts on contact, but when it comes to sighting a bow, if you shoot if you shoot a gap, which is I put my arrow here and the target's there, and I know that it's going to come up and hit the target. Like
Yeah.
my arrow is just slightly below some amount, and it's individual.
So it's like when you're
If you
I just want to be a bit more clear with that. So it's like when you're drawn, you can see your sight picture almost when you're looking, you see the tip of your arrow. And it's like using that position of that tip of the arrow relative to where, okay, so if you're at 20 yards, the certain distance gap that you aim, if you aim above that tip of that arrow, you know that you're going to hit certain distances, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, so let's
Okay.
let's pick a distance. Let's pick a distance. So we're going to shoot at 20 yards right now,
Yeah.
and at my draw length with my bow, I don't know what it is exactly, but I'm just going to make a close approximation of what it might be.
Yeah.
Let's say that a deer is, 20 inches deep. A deer is 20 inches deep,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And I want to shoot it exactly in the very center of its body, just for this
Yep.
description, right?
Yep.
So we use 20 inches because we want a round number, and we're using the center of the body because I want it to be easier math for me. I would expect that myself and probably you, the tip of our arrow would be on the brisket of that animal, 10 inches low. Now, I'll tell you some things that are going to change that. The length of your arrow.
Yep.
So the longer your arrow is, the more it comes up into your line of sight. So the tighter that gap is.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. The speed of your bow tightens that gap up. The weight of your arrow expands that gap.
So there's all these
Yeah,
different factors, which now makes it super clear, which is why you only keep one setup. Because if you have all those things that can be
exactly.
completely changing your accuracy, best to just keep it the same so that you're always, yeah, aiming the right
Yeah.
spot.
Right now, right now, I'm getting back on the horse with my bow. I'm a new dad. Time's been limited. So in the last few months, I've been shooting a 35-pound recurve that my wife has.
Yeah,
So how did I make sure that it was similar? I just built the arrows to
same.
slow that little bow down enough so that I maintained my trajectory just for right now.
Yeah, so that
Yeah,
your aim position is exactly the same or close enough.
within reason. Yeah, close enough. Close enough that it won't change anything.
That's interesting.
The other thing about traditional archery that's going to make it challenging, um, that point of impact, it will change relative to the way you grip your bow. Is that consistent? Are you influencing that arrow? Because maybe you shoot a compound bow and you shoot 300 feet per second, let's say.
Yep.
Well, my longbow is quite skookum, and it's only like in the 180s, 190s.
Yeah.
People probably maybe don't believe that because that's pretty fast, but I have a very long draw length. So I get a lot of power stroke out of my bow.
How long's your draw length?
A 31-inch draw length,
Okay.
which is
Yeah.
not that's quite long for a traditional bow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm 6'2", and I have a positive 2.5-inch ape index. So I have the wingspan of a 6'4.5" person. So I have long arms.
I'm kind of the same.
So I
Yeah.
get a lot of oomph, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But with my bow traveling at 180 feet per second, it's on the string fractionally longer.
Mm.
So the influences we have on our bow hand, how cleanly the string leaves our releasing hand, because of the slower speeds, I think it
Yes.
has a greater
Yeah.
influence
No,
on the arrow over
definitely.
a compound.
Definitely does. So you've really got to have good form. If your form isn't good,
Yeah.
then you're going to be in trouble. Okay.
Yeah, so I would say if somebody was going to start, don't be worried about where you're hitting, right?
Yeah.
Make sure that you dress the bow the same way every time, right? get yourself a shot sequence. Like when I'm sitting on that hillside and those sheep are coming, I am going through it. And you know what? Maybe it's some psychological trick I'm doing to make sure that I don't get scared that I'm going to miss or screw up. I'm distracting myself, right? I've heard
Yes.
people do that. I
Yeah, yeah,
didn't realize
definitely.
until I just said it now. But I'm going through it. I'm addressing my bow the same way. I'm putting my fingers on that string the exact same way. And then the only other thing I would say is the internet is a pretty toxic and brutal place. Um,
Top tip.
yeah, try and find somebody who isn't completely, I don't know. Do you swear?
I
I almost said
I like to swear.
yeah, I say I would find try and the internet has a lot of people that are completely full of shit.
Yeah.
So go out to an archery shoot if they're in your area. See, a traditional guy will let you shoot his bow. The only time I won't let you shoot my bow is like the weeks leading up to archery season because it's now a sacred thing that doesn't get touched by anybody but me.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to have my string cut, somebody dry fire it. It's too close to hunting season. A couple weeks before then, I have like 15 longbows. I'll just go change it, but I don't want to do that close to the season, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I stay. I'm pretty religious about that. But if you go to an archery shoot this summer, somebody will let you shoot. Anybody who has a traditional bow will let you shoot it, and if they don't, they just don't get it, right?
Yeah.
So go shoot some bows, see which ones you like. Don't worry about how you shoot. Sorry, worry very much about how you shoot, but don't worry about the outcome of how you shoot,
Yes.
right? Where you're hitting is not that important right now
Okay.
because you don't have arrows that are tuned for you yet. You haven't learned to expand your back into what your real draw length should be, right?
Yeah.
Um, the bow may be overbowed for you, but a million things can cause you to shoot poorly in the early stages. But my point is to get some exposure, see what you like about it, and through that process, you will meet people who likely and hopefully aren't completely full of shit and will help you get your arrows built for your bow. Help you say, hey, maybe let me take a couple slow motion videos of you shooting so that you can see that your hand is going like this every time you
Flapping
let go of
around.
the
Yeah.
string, or you're going like this, which is pretty common,
Okay.
you know, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it's like if you go on the internet today and say, hey, what broadhead's good? You are going to get 100 comments from
Yeah.
people who have never killed anything and they have 40 different types of broadheads in their house. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly
So,
what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, keep your circle small and find some people that you can trust. I guarantee you, if you meet somebody at archery shoot that has a longbow or a recurve, they're going to let you shoot it. And, be cautious around target bows because they have like, draw stop, sorry, clickers on them and things like that these people might be sensitive about you just like boom blowing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like you see somebody with a bow like mine, I just like a hunting bow, they're gonna let you shoot it. The other thing I'd say is maybe this is a public service announcement. Don't touch somebody's bow without talking to them about it. That's a big no-no.
Yeah.
And then there are certain bows, they're called self bows. They're all made entirely of wood.
Yes, yeah.
Um, any bow that doesn't look uh, industrially manufactured. Like my bow is not industrially manufactured, but it has the appearance of being manufactured, right? It
Yeah, yeah.
has,
Okay.
some limbs and things like that.
Yep.
Any bow that doesn't look like that, you just don't touch them because they're very soon going to break. They're very close to breaking, and if you pull them too far or you hold them back for too long, just be sensitive around other people's stuff.
Good
Yeah.
to know.
But
Yeah.
it's one of the most welcoming communities you can be part of.
Okay. Yeah. It's definitely where I am. I mean, nothing compared to you. I'd say I'm in a bit of a remote area. But like for California, there isn't as much of a community here. I mean, there's hunters, but it's a lot of old school guys. There aren't that many trad hunters that I've met. But yeah, definitely
Okay.
putting the search out, I'll find someone, I'm sure.
What are the species that you can hunt there?
We have black-tailed deer,
Must, yeah.
and there are black bear, turkeys, wild boar. There aren't so many wild boar here on the coast, but if you go inland a bit, you've got to know a few people, but there are some around, so there's plenty of stuff to hunt.
So it
Um,
sounds to me like all of those animals are even if you had a compound bow,
Mm,
you're shooting them at close range anyways.
definitely. Around here, yeah, it's like thick,
Yeah.
thick rainforest.
So you're not really disadvantaging yourself exploring this new experience because, I mean, you can hit this big you'll be hitting this big in a month or two.
Yeah, like a 6 inch. What's that? Kind of like a 6 inch gap, you
Yeah.
said?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Good to know. I'm emboldened.
I
Good.
would say this.
Yeah,
People always used to ask me, um, they used to say, I'm not good enough to hunt with my bow yet.
yeah.
And I'm like, that sounds insane to me. That ostrich egg that's behind you, I have one in my house just over there.
Oh, do you?
And I would bet everything I've ever owned that if I put the arrow this far from that, when my son at 2 years old is pulls his longbow back, which he has, and I put the arrow this far from behind that ostrich egg, he'll hit it.
Hang on, wait. So a couple of inches. Say that again. So you're doing like a couple of
Yeah, so
inches
my
gap with your
my
fingers.
point is, yeah, so my point is that if you pick up a longbow today,
Yeah.
you get it all tuned, next week you kind of have somebody's mentored you and stuff,
Uh-huh.
and at 10 yards you can hit this every time.
Okay, nice. Like a 4 inch gap,
Then
a
that's
4 inch
then you can hunt.
ring. Yeah, as long as you're
You just
close
can't hunt
enough.
past 10 yards. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is part
Yeah.
of the fun
My
as well.
point, yeah, and my point being is like even my little son who can pull his bow back and shoot it, it's likely to go on the TV or the couch or in your leg. But if I put the arrow right behind the target and he lets go, it's going to go right in the target.
Yeah, yeah.
So change the way you think about hunting and you can hunt with a longbow tomorrow.
Well, that's the thing as well. I think that's part of what's made me more curious is that something in me when I'm hunting all over actually, and particularly here, we talked about like the environment being very close, so your opportunities tend to happen at quite short range. Most of the shots
Mhm.
I've taken on animals here have been no more than 40 yards. But also over in South Africa, where my wife is from, and I'm lucky enough to go have some adventures hunting over there,
Yeah.
I just always find myself being compelled to get closer. I just always want to get close because it's so fun. Being like really up close to an animal and seeing it snuffling around and like thinking and I don't know. There's something amazing about that. Being so close to the animal. That's a trip. So I've had like I was lucky enough to have a diker be like 6 yards away from me. And like which is a diker is like a very small antelope.
Yeah.
Probably weighs like 25 pounds.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that thing just walking and just being able to draw back at exactly the right moment, just with its head behind a twig or whatever, and it'd be so close that it's like it's everywhere. I'm looking with the sight picture, you know. It's
How
like
far was it?
6 yards away.
And you had a compound?
I did, yeah. I mean, like
What pin did you use?
I aimed with the top pin right at the bottom of its chest, like at
Okay.
the bottom of its brisket, because I knew I'd hit high when I was that close, and it
Yeah.
smacked it right exactly where. My thinking on that was I'm going to aim like I kind of aimed the lowest that I could possibly hit that it would kill, and then everywhere up from that is going to be fatal, if that makes sense.
I don't know the math
Yeah.
on because they're not very deep. They're quite small.
Oh, they are quite small, yeah.
They're like a small dog, like maybe a Jack Russell Terrier.
Slightly larger, but yeah, about that size, yeah.
So small. So their chest cavity is pretty shallow.
No more than like 8 or
Eh,
9 inches, yeah.
yeah. I would we used to have this a lot at archery shoots.
Yeah.
Uh, Instead of having a compound target like 40, 50 yards away, they
Uh-huh.
would put it at 5 yards.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the classic thing people would do was shoot completely under the target.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about how your bow is set up, your compound bow, you have your sight, which is kind of often a round thing with pins in it.
Yep.
And then the arrow is here,
Yep, below it.
and the target is so close that the arrow hasn't come up into your sight picture yet. So you have to aim with your like 80-yard pin.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
So
Maybe
that's a
maybe that
challenging
is what
shot
I
you
did.
made.
I don't
I believe you did because you hit it. Yeah.
yeah, I
I'm
did.
just saying
Yeah.
for the sake of the podcast, I'm
Yeah.
saying that's a really challenging shot to do with a compound.
It is. It's
The
something which you've
close
got to
one.
practice. You've got to practice. I think
Yeah.
I definitely find actually, I think I may have instinctively done something different because I know actually when I shoot 6 yards, I have to use my like 40 pin, and
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
then
So you
hits
knew
right.
at the time. Yeah.
So maybe that's what I
Yeah.
did. I don't know. Sometimes
The
those
fact
moments,
is, the point, I was just trying to extract the little juice out of that because
Yeah.
that's a cool moment you had for because it's a technically hard shot to make, even though it's close.
Yeah.
But it also being that closely woven into the experience, it'd probably stay with you for the rest of your life
Oh yeah.
because in, you were so there in that moment. Every sense is tingling. Everything is perfect because it has to be to make it to have that happen, right?
Definitely.
Pretty predator rich environment, Africa,
Oh yeah.
you know.
That's part of the
Yeah,
amazing
so
thing
they're
about learning. Yeah. You can make a lot of
yeah,
mistakes
yeah.
and kind of learn even in the same day.
Very famous bow hunter called me once. He's before he was quite famous, and he was going to switch from this was probably 10 or 12 years ago. He was going to switch uh from compound to traditional archery to prove a point. And
Okay.
he did, and he's like unbelievable. Like I mean, hold this guy with the highest esteem ever. Like he's legit a killer. And I said to him, we were talking about what bows look like and kind of what direction he should go. And this was a short phone call, only a 30-minute. I was a guide at the time, and he used to come to the outfit and hunt there.
Okay.
And I said to him, name redacted, I hope you get the chance to make all the mistakes I've made because it's very fulfilling. It's a fulfilling life to kind of learn that way instead of having it just like, buying your way out of every situation. Go out there and make some mistakes and learn from them. And I think you have an opportunity to have a fulfilling life if you do it that way, especially with a bow.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
true. That's the thing, and will let's talk a bit about your guiding as well in a second because I do want to ask you about your experiences with that. But the the funny thing about hunting in South Africa, and I may have said this when we talked before, but like it's a very rich environment. There's a lot of
Yeah.
targets, a lot of animals that you can encounter. I mean, it's amazing. I've gone hunting with some of the guides over there, and it's like 2 hours and you've thrown 3 arrows or more, like it's bonkers.
Wow.
It's just like nothing like some of the experiences I've had over here, which are also great, but just in their own way.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
having said that, it's like the number of like, I think when I was last in South Africa, I think I managed to take 8 animals, I think, when I was there. Walk and stalk, which is like, I love walk and stalk. It's so much more fun and more rewarding
Yeah.
because of the
Yeah.
challenge. But like, I probably messed up like 200 stalks,
Yeah.
150 stalks. It's so hard. Like the reactions that the animals have, the smell, the instincts, even everything is so heightened there. Um,
Yeah.
so it's like my success rate is really low there, but like you get a lot of chances and then you learn a bunch. And I think that that's so rewarding in the end when you do have success.
If I was gonna say, okay, so I can't turn back time for myself,
Yeah.
right? I lived a certain life and I'm here where I am today. I can't change it. But if my little boy came to me and he said, Dad, I really want to get good at the last 10 seconds of a hunt, like that moment when everything has to be perfect for it to happen,
Yep.
I would say, okay, my suggestion to you, boy, is move to Hawaii for the winter and hunt there. And you'll probably get 500 stocks in that winter, and then go to New Zealand and Australia for the spring and get another 2,000 stocks there, and then spend the rest of the year, whatever that lines up to be in Africa. Because it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
we don't have the game density and the hunting opportunity in the Yukon where I live to really perfect that art. It takes a lifetime to do it when you could really give yourself a huge boost if you went. Like I have this friend named Ben Solaris.
Yeah.
We used to talk a lot more than we do now. Life's kind of we drifted apart, but we stay in touch, right? If
Yeah.
I kill a ram, I'll call him and tell him about it. He hunts all over the world. He is somebody that people should check out. And I think he grew up in Australia, been killing pigs since he was like 9. That guy just understands how to do the last 10 seconds.
Yeah.
He does it perfectly every time. You know what I mean? He just doesn't mess it up.
Yep.
I met him through guiding, and it was just like, okay, this guy is If you give him one chance, he's going to make it happen, you know. Whereas normal people like me or I don't
Me.
know, other people might, yeah,
Yeah.
they might need 10 stalks. Or in my case, for sheep hunting, it took me probably 150 days on the mountain to get one. It's hard.
It's true though. That's my favorite. Like, I mean, I know there's a lot of work building up to that moment, but those 10 seconds are so juicy, aren't they? And it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so intense an experience, and you can learn so much. And there's so many ways, like, as soon as you think, like,
Yeah.
oh, I think I'm getting this figured out now, that 10 seconds changes.
Oof.
Like, I was just in Colorado and I managed to, like, first time ever in the mountains in Colorado. And I had the whole full guns blazing experience calling a big bull. It was like a big 5x6 in, charging in 25 yards away. And the
Perfect.
experiences that I had from being in South Africa, I drew my bow at the right moment. Everything was there, and he just came in and he just stopped with like a tree just covering his vitals, not quite right. And I could have flung an arrow. I've said this a few times. Apologies, listeners, if you've heard me tell this story too many times. But, I could have taken that moment to take a shot, but I decided it just didn't feel quite right. I prefer to like really take a shot when I know that it's going to be a good shot.
I missed 21 animals in a row when I was like between 19 and 21.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was telling the guy who made me that bow this story
Yeah.
that year that it was happening. And he said to me, Adam, you're taking shots that don't exist.
Mm.
Yeah.
So,
If you wait or you don't shoot, you have the same outcome,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know.
I
So
think,
that was
yeah,
part of that took me a long time to learn. That was a hard two falls, you know.
that's
And
interesting.
I'll never it was so formative in my bow hunting that I won't ever forget it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's interesting. I guess I'm kind of like the other way where I'm sometimes too conservative and I don't take the shot when I should. But it is interesting, right? You've got to learn the things that you've got to kind of whatever whatever way that you approach things, you've got to learn to kind of mediate that so that you make the best choices based on whatever your instincts
Yeah.
are, and then
Yeah.
yeah, get the result that you want. So
Exactly. Exactly.
tell me about guiding then. So at what point did you start guiding, and where was that?
So I started guiding in 2013.
Okay.
I started with black bear guiding in Alberta, and I didn't really like that a lot. In Alberta, I didn't like it was kind of just you go out with beavers and bait, fill barrels, drive the client out on the quad, drop them off, and pick them up that night. If you're
Okay.
not really, the guide themselves aren't really getting to do the hunting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not, there's not a lot of hunting there. So I was like, okay, I really want to guide hunts, um, but I am not interested in the bear. I wasn't guiding because I wanted to do it as a job. A lot of guys are doing the bear guiding in the spring because I'm a full 365-day year guide, they'll say, right? So they do the spring bear, and in Alberta, it's a lot of baiting, which I totally support the idea of baiting. Um, but it just isn't the hunt I was looking for. So then I transitioned into um, mule deer archery hunting. Um, I kind of got ripped off by that outfitter. He tried to, there was like this deal where we were going to start another business and there was a large amount of money invested in it. And then all of a sudden the whole 50-50 concept kind of went out the window and
Ugh.
so did that relationship. But I
Yeah.
really met a lot of great people bow hunting for mule deer doing that. And then simultaneously, I was also guiding whitetail and elk hunts in Alberta. Do you know the internet sensation guy on a buffalo?
I've heard of that name, but talk me through. Yeah.
That guy's name is Rick Gwynn. And I didn't know who he was, but he's like fifth generation outfitter in Alberta or fourth generation. Guided people like Fred Bear when he got his bighorn sheep.
Wow. Okay.
Um, so he's like legitimate, right?
Yeah.
And that meme kind of thing on the internet is him entirely. He like is a guy that rides around on a buffalo. He's nuts. His son is equally as crazy in the best way that you can say the word crazy. They've killed more Boone and Crockett rams than I don't know if anybody else can claim they have. And I got a job with them doing whitetail and mule deer, sorry, whitetail and elk hunts. And I did that all the way up until 2000 and maybe 18 or something like that. But anyways, really enjoyed that. Um, I did one fall in the Yukon for sheep and caribou and grizzly. Had a fantastic time doing that. And then kind of at the end of that timeline, wanted to look a little bit into myself. I got an offer to go do sheep in BC, and it was going to be like the entire fall.
Okay.
And, I love my wife and I love bow hunting. So I would have had to give both of those two things up.
Yeah, yeah.
So for me, I kind of did I had a kind of conversation with myself about what I wanted to do with my life. And as much as I enjoyed helping somebody else get their own animal, I really just am maybe a selfish a-hole and wanted to hunt for myself. So I left that life behind me
Yeah.
and, went from hunting 250 days a year to 20,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
20 quality days that are mine.
Yeah, yeah. I guess also you could get with anything, right? You're doing something with that intensity, you can get burned out pretty quick. Well, not pretty quick, but over time.
Yeah, and I wasn't that intense. Like my buddy Rye, he's very intense. Basically, he's like Mongolia, NWT, Southern BC, Mexico. He's like doing this whole circuit all year round.
Wow, yeah.
That's a guy that's intense, right?
That's
That's
hard.
a guy that's he's like I often get asked like um by people like which outfit should I go with to kill my ram if I want to get one with a bow? And it's like, obviously, I would say personally, if I had the money to do that, I would be going with this person. And if I was going with those people, I would be asking for this guy. And that guy would be Rye Johnson. Like
Okay.
him and his brother we're not the closest friends, but we know each other. Like, oh, well, I'll be in his brother's wedding, so I'm close enough friends that way. But
Yeah.
those two guys, if I had to say, I need somebody to help me kill a sheep, those would be the dudes I'd be going to call.
Good to know,
Yeah.
man. I'm writing that down.
Yeah. They're like the assassins, eh?
Yeah. So,
Hmm.
there's something I also wanted to ask you. I think I remembered you said, what was the name? You said, is it man with a buffalo or guy with a
Guy on a buffalo.
guy on a buffalo? Okay, so I think I remember that because previous guest Lee Hauk, who's a friend of yours,
Oh yeah, Lee.
I think he was mentored by a guy on a buffalo in some capacity. I
That's how we met.
Okay, right. So that's
Yeah.
now the pieces are sliding into place. The thing I
Yeah.
wanted to ask was that must have been amazing learning from such experienced people. Can you name anything that you kind of picked up from them, like a moment where you learned something from them that was kind of like, oh, okay, these guys know what
Yeah.
they're doing.
Yeah. I'll say this. This is the type of guy Rick was. Rick's still alive. So I was young when I met Rick. Like I was what was I? In my 20s, early 20s at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have been yeah, I met Rick in 2015, so almost 9 years ago. And I had killed a lot of animals in my life at that point. One thing Rick did with me, um, and it's like such an impactful and important thing that happened to me that I tell this to I use this in work meetings as well when I'm trying to explain how to mentor new people. Because like let's say for example, I had maybe killed or been around a couple dead elk in my life at that point.
Hmm.
Well, Rick had been around a couple hundred dead elk in his life, right? So 400 dead elk.
Yeah.
And there was a crowd of maybe 10 or 15 people. One of the clients had shot a really big bull, and we could drive up to where this bull was up on this big hillside. So we took this little Toyota vehicle we have with a kind of a winching system to get the elk into the vehicle. On this piece of land, we didn't gut any animals out in the field. So we got this elk and we brought it back towards where we had cleaned, where we used to clean all the animals because They didn't want to disturb where the elk the habitat they were using.
Yeah, yeah,
The economics of outfitting, I guess, probably drive that a bit. So now we're back where we're going to clean all these animals. The energy is high. Everyone's excited. The whole camp is there to see this big bull. And instead of Rick putting me on the spot in front of all of those people to clean this bull, he said something to me that I will remember for the rest of my life. He said, "Hey, Adam, I don't know how you've done this in the past, but I'm going to show you how I want it done here." And he did two things with that.
yeah,
He told me he was going to do it in front of everybody, right?
yeah,
And he told me he's going to show me how it's done without telling everybody else in that room or in that area that I didn't know what I was doing.
yeah, yeah,
It's like that kind of person comes around in your life maybe a couple times, right? And he processed that elk, showed me how to do it, took his time, didn't make one unnecessary cut the entire time. I've done every animal I've killed since that. I've done every animal that way that I've killed since then. And it's just like the guy had an opportunity where he could have gone two ways, right? He
yeah,
could have
yeah,
embarrassed me or put me in a situation where I had to do it on my own the way I've done it before, but it wouldn't have been as clean or as quick as the way he was.
hmm,
Or he could have gone the other way and said, "Hey, I'm going to take 10 minutes because he's so fast. I'm going to take 10 minutes. I'm going to gut this elk and I'm going to show this guy how it's done in a way that he doesn't have to be embarrassed."
yeah,
That's a person you want to be like when you grow up, right? It's a
definitely.
quality dude. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
ego can play into things like that, right? Like you power and sort of
Yeah.
hierarchy or whatever it is going on that
Yeah.
not every human is kind of even I guess aware of that situation or will try and somehow flex in some way. So
Exactly.
it's
But
just
this comes with guys who have killed everything.
yeah. Yeah.
He doesn't care.
Doesn't have anything to
He's
prove.
not here. He is so much better than me at this that he doesn't need to prove it. It has an aura of it around him and his son when they come into an area to
Y-
hunt.
Yeah. Feels
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
positive thing to be
Yes.
around.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Yeah. Yeah. So then I left guiding and I started hunt for myself. And the whole time I was guiding, I was still obviously hunting as much as humanly possible for myself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I kind of early on in my life decided that I was going to dedicate myself to um, trying to hunt really challenging animals with my longbow. And that led me in the direction of sheep hunting, which is kind of like what I don't know, my favorite thing to do with my bow, probably.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did that happen before you made the move back to the Yukon, or did you get heavily into that again, kind of while you were in Alberta?
So there are three archery zones that matter in my world.
Okay.
There's the Canmore Bow Zone in Alberta, where you can hunt sheep with your bow.
Yep.
There's the Todigan Mountain Bow Zone in northern BC, where you can hunt with your bow in the snow draw. And then there's the Yukon Bow Zone. Um, my wife and I kind of strategically took jobs and moved around the provinces to give me the best chance to hunt those zones. So I've been moving around Alberta, BC, and the Yukon
Okay.
for a long time trying to get a sheep with my bow. And that's, a huge commitment to my wife. I mean, a huge part of my success is my wife, right? Supporting me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to help a lot.
Oh, yeah. Well, she knows she comes with me on some hunts, so she knows how hard it is
Yeah.
and that I can't just willy-nilly go try it. I have to like dedicate myself to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell
But
me about you were saying about going into the mountain hunting. Yeah, at some point, you're like, sheep, mountains, really difficult. That's my jam. So when did that happen? And what was your first kind of experience or memory of finding that world?
what was it? So a long time ago, two things happened in my life. Oh man, more than that. Okay. Four things happened in my life. This guy named Larry Hanna used to come to our business that we had in the Yukon when I was a kid, and he killed massive rams with his bow in the Yukon. And he would tell us stories, share tactics. And I was like this big, right? I was small. I
Yeah.
was probably 6 or 7 years old. My older brothers were old enough, though, that they knew what he was doing and could ask the questions that I couldn't even think of at that time.
Mm.
But I was there and I could hear about it and
Absorb it.
fantasize about it too and absorb it.
Yeah.
So that was pretty formative. I thought about that probably my whole life. The idea of somebody doing something. So back in those days, the compound bow was essentially a recurve when he was doing it, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
whether he had the bows were so terrible back in the day, the compounds.
Yeah.
So he did it the hard way. And any archery ram is a huge accomplishment. I'll say that right off the bat. It doesn't matter to me what bow you use, but for me, the fantasy was to try and do it the hard way. And then fast forward a little bit, there's a game farm that exists in the Yukon, and they needed to capture some sheep to be installed into that game farm for from the wild. So my dad and three other guys went up into the mountains and caught these baby sheep. That was a government sanctioned and licensed activity. They caught these sheep and put them into this game farm. It's kind of like a zoo, but it's a they have like a mountain there
But
and the
like a
sheep
big
are on it.
space. Yeah. How do you even do that?
Yeah.
Do you know?
So my I'm not very close with my dad anymore, but when I was young and close with him, he told me that they would climb up in the mountains and they'd spend like every day during the lambing season up in those mountains watching the sheep. And there's one very distinct spot. I talked about it earlier, the Slims River. And there's like 500 sheep that live on this mountain there. You can see them right from the road. They would go and watch for a ewe to drop her lamb, and they would be within a couple hundred meters of it.
Yeah.
And as soon as the lamb hit the ground, they would race over there and try to get it before it latched onto its mom and got the strength to get away. That's how they caught them. So that's what they were doing back in the, who knows how long ago that was, but not something that would ever be allowed today.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But what we used to do is later on, those sheep grew up and they had their own offspring, whatever. And we would, because my dad was part of capturing them and knew the man who owned the game farm very well, we were allowed to go like up into the mountains and be with the sheep. So that really was pretty formative for me. And then from then on, I wanted to become a bighorn sheep biologist. There's not a lot of positions for that. There's probably one bighorn sheep biologist in Alberta and one in BC, right?
Yeah.
So I'd have a better chance of getting into the NHL for hockey. Right? It's pretty hard to get that job.
Yeah. I heard.
So I quickly transitioned into a different career path, which is fulfilling for me. And then the other two things that happened was I read the book by Andy Russell, and I told you about this before. It's called Horns in the High Country.
Yes.
And it's kind of about like the early years of a very famous photographer's life as a guide and sheep hunter. And then I read this other book. It's called Sheep Hunting the Upper Yukon by Charles Sheldon, who was a turn of the 20th century, like in that 1900 to 1910 kind of period. Sheep hunter who came to the Yukon to collect sheep specimens. They were trying to see if stone sheep existed in the Yukon. So he was hunting Dalls for dark hair. And his book is very good. And then when I put those all together, I started to really, I don't know, admire the terrain and the challenge of being in the terrain. And then also, it's pretty beautiful up there and it's pretty nice to be on the mountains. And it's almost like meditative when you're doing something that's very hard. Or I've heard people like, I don't have a lot of experience in this, but like people that train a certain really challenging thing or they do something like a pool player is in a really hard pool tournament, and or a chess player or a martial arts person is in a thing, whatever they compete in. They kind of, because it's so hard, they have to concentrate on what they're doing,
Yes.
and it puts everything in the world else behind you. For
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
it's really like that too.
I think it's called like flow state, I think, right?
Yeah. And imagine how good that feels to be in and out of that for 10 days. It's, and you're alone and it's like, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, so I would love to hear. I've not been lucky enough. I mean, I've hunted in some mountains, but was it, no pun intended, like a steep learning curve getting up there? Like, do you remember kind of having to adapt and kind of realizing, okay, have I bitten off more than I can chew here? Or were there any moments like that that you remember?
First sheep hunt I ever went on, we took horses back into the mountains in Alberta, and I had nothing, man. I had like steel toe boots from work and stuff like that. This
Wow.
was a long time ago. I was 19 when I went on that hunt. And who I am now compared to that person, I definitely would have killed a ram on that hunt. And I'll say this, there was a guy that is just like me today that came scrambling up the mountain as we were coming down, and they killed a ram right up there that we walked away from. Not, we didn't understand. So what was the steepest learning curve for me? Okay. The steepest learning curve for anybody that wants to hunt sheep in the mountains is going to be identifying legal rams.
Okay. Interesting.
What's a legal one look like? Um, you do not, I mean, I don't know how it works in the US, but in Canada, the horn shape, size, and length play a huge role in whether an animal is legal or not. So age and length. Um, and sitting on a sheep at 70 yards. When I say sitting on them, I'm kind of coming from above always, with the thermal from the midday sun in my face and sitting there for 6, 7 hours at 80 yards from a sheep and just staring at it through your spotting scope and being like, I've seen it 5 times. It looked legal. I just need to see it one more time. I just need to see it one more time. But the sheep never gives you the perfect look, right? It's always like, so you're just sitting there and you can't blink and you can't look away. So confirming if a ram is legal is a huge learning curve. The other thing I'd say, this one's probably less, it's going to be more obvious when people do it, is I would say conditioning yourself to start cold every day
Yes.
and then also um, go without. What
Yeah.
can you really go without?
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
That speaks to my heart.
So I I myself, if I'm going to pack into the mountains, so I'm really trying to trim my weight down, but I don't have the money to really lose a lot of weight in my gear. The sheep hunt I went on last fall, fortunately, we killed a ram the very first day of the hunt, but I had 74 pounds in my backpack when I got off the airplane.
Wow.
So try to figure out what you can do without,
Hmm.
because we went in there with a lot of food because we were going to stay for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
On that hunt, I packed it all around for nothing, right? On other hunts, I've hunted right till the 11th day and shot the ram as I was taking my tent down. You're going to be without water. You're going to be without food at some point in this adventure. I would say get comfortable with just not having what you need.
I think that's definitely a good tip, and that's something which I'm gradually trying to learn. Because
Yeah.
I'm definitely, when I started, was a bit of an overpacker, and I probably still am. Anyone who's been out on a trip with me will know. I just have a bit of an active imagination, so I'm always able to think of all the potential things that could happen and
Yeah.
why I should have the essential piece of gear that will solve this situation. But then after a while, you got to realize, like, what are the actual chances of that happening, and can I just figure something else out if it comes to it?
Those old timers, like Charles Sheldon in his books, he has flannel shirt, wool pants, hunting boots, small package of crackers or some indistinguishable, non-perishable food,
Yeah,
and his rifle.
yeah,
And that's what they did it. Now I have like I'm embarrassed when I say I have 75 pounds,
yeah.
74, whatever it is. My rifle on that hunt, I had my rifle, that's 7 pounds. If I want to lose 2 pounds there, I gotta spend another couple grand. I'm not spending that money. It's never
Yeah, yeah,
happening.
yeah. That's a big thing.
My spotting scope, my spotting scope and tripod, 6.5 pounds. I could lose 2 pounds there, but I'm not spending that 2,000 to do it,
Yeah.
right? You can't buy
Yeah.
a lighter tent than I have. It's heavy. Everything's heavy.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. The other thing is I'd say when to go back to that learning to do without, the truth of the matter is you can't carry the amount of water you need. So you're going to be without some water. I hunted with some people before, and the example would be I have a 3 liter camel pack that I keep inside my bag, and I carry a camel pack because you can squish it. It's this thin at some point, so you can like put it in a really small seep and still get water. Whereas a bottle, you would have to kind of dig it
Oh,
under there. And then I have a 1 liter bottle, and I carry like a smart water 1 liter bottle.
yes.
And it has a really small filter that can attach to it. And so I have 4 liters of water on me. And that's what I expect I'll need to go to the top of the mountain, set up camp, cook my meal, and then have breakfast the next day. And then the next day, the other thing I do is I really don't hunt the same place twice for sheep. So it's kind of like, are there going to be sheep here? I don't know. Is there water here? I don't know. So you could likely hike down to go back and get one more water.
Okay.
So it's a risk, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is. And it's definitely something I've
Yeah.
experienced. There's definitely yeah, being comfortable with being uncomfortable and being okay
I'm
with that
never
kind of
uncomfortable.
concern.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say I'm never cold. Well, that's BS. It's total BS. I try not to get cold, right? I carry enough gear to not get cold
Yeah, yeah.
as best I can. If it's raining, pouring cats and dogs, and you can't see and you can't glass, well, you can't sheep hunt, so you just stay in the tent,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
I always carry way too much food, so trying to trim that down so there's ample food around.
yeah.
So the creature comforts are there, but it's like the pain of that backpack on your body. The more water you put on your back, that's where it becomes a problem.
Yeah, it's real. So,
Yeah.
okay, I've got to hear this, if you don't mind sharing. As we're in this world of mountains and sheep, you were recently, well, not recently, I guess it was last year or was it the year before, you were successful with your trad bow on was
Yeah.
it a Dall sheep? A ram?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Amazing,
Yeah.
man. Well, first of
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to hear the whole story.
I went to the Alberta Bowhunters Association. My friend Travis Bauer was getting honored for killing the Alberta Bighorn uh, record with his longbow. So it's not the all-time record, it's not the rifle, it's not the compound. He killed the biggest bighorn with a bow that year, and then it also became the biggest one ever killed with a longbow, traditional archery. And it didn't just beat the previous record; it like beat it by like 5 inches. So a huge accomplishment.
Yeah.
And I had just killed my Dall sheep that I have next to me, and um, when I killed mine, it was like I didn't shoot this animal because it was big. I shot it because I had probably 150 days of sheep hunting and 30 rams coming towards me. And it was the first legal one that walked into a shot, a place to get a shot. Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't shoot this one, but mine is also quite big. So we were there together, and people are coming to talk to us that we know. And because I was in Alberta for so long, and one of the guys, a very accomplished sheep hunter, killed everything with his bow. He said, I can't imagine a sheep hunt I've been on where I've got one with my longbow, with where I could have got it with a longbow. And I was like, well, that's a pretty fair thing to say, but maybe had you not killed so many, an opportunity would have come up later. So it
Yeah.
takes
Yeah.
time, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
The only thing that separates me from people that haven't done it is time, the commitment of time. Yeah. So I'll tell the story. Um, my wife was pregnant at the time, and I really knew that there was going to be a parenting induced pause on my hunting.
Okay.
And to get to put in perspective, the last really good sheep hunt I went on with my longbow, I was on the mountain for 22 days and didn't come home with one. I missed I had a really good chance and shot just underneath this ram in the cliffs. That was bigger than the one I ended up killing later. So then fast forward 2 years and my wife is pregnant and it's going to be time where I'm gonna not be able to hunt very hard. So I put in for draws like I do every year and didn't get any draws. So I was planning my hunt on what I was gonna do that year. And I thought, okay, I'll go try and find stone sheep in an area I had been scouting, and I'll just take my rifle. And I didn't get the archery draw. Say la vie, I'll hunt another area and explore some other country. About 5 days before hunting season, somebody turned their drawback and my name got pulled. So in the Yukon, you put your name in and you get an exponential increase of your odds every year you put in.
Okay.
So anybody can get drawn from the first year you put in to the till 20 years of putting in, you can get drawn, but just the person who has 20 years of entry has way more chance than me. So I put in, didn't get drawn, and got what they call a I can't remember the term, but it's like when somebody returns the tag and they draw a new name. I got
Yes.
the second crack at this tag.
Okay.
So I was like, oh my God. I fortunately I was in really good shape. I was ready to go. I had been shooting my bow all year, and it just so happened I already had my bags packed to go sheep hunting. So I obviously was pretty stoked. And then shortly after I got my results, a buddy of mine called me and he's like, "Hey, dude, you won't believe it. I got drawn for archery sheep." I was like, "Dude, me too." So he's like, "Can I come with you?" And I said, "For sure you can." But there's a caveat there that I told him we won't get two rams and I can't not get one, right? Like I can't give up my hunt to go and hunt with you. So what I said is because I had so much time in the area, like I've probably been into that same spot like 50 days. So I know it pretty good.
Yeah. Plus all the travel time.
Yeah. So I know it pretty good. And then I said to him, what I said is my buddy Greg, he shot a bigger ram than I did actually, but um, I said, I'll hang out with you for the first 3 days. And then I'm going to go on my own so that we're not kind of trying to kill the same sheep all the time. And it's a humongous area, right? It's like 50 kilometers long and 50 kilometers wide, this huge area. So it's big enough for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, about 10% of the people who draw are successful, and that includes all forms of archery equipment, crossbow, compound. I don't know if crossbows are in there, but anyways, any type of bow.
Hmm.
So we went for the first 3 days. Of course, the first third of every sheep hunt is the hardest part, like getting up through the bush, wading through the mosquitoes that are in the low valley, finding water, setting up camp, all that stuff. But anyways, the very first day of sheep season, we're together now, and we see some rams, make a good stalk, got into 60 yards. I said, how close do you need to be with your compound? And he said, I don't want to shoot over 50. So I was like, okay, we'll just sit here at 60. And the ram was really nice, probably same quality of ram he killed eventually, but it was very skinny, so it could have been quite an old sheep. Its neck was like, pencil thin, and its bones were showing through its body. But it was just probably just slightly out of his comfort zone with his bow. So we sat there for the day, and the sheep got up and fed away. Went back to camp. The next day was a big rainstorm came in, and we kind of just, the sheep hunting is going to be slow. We can sit in the tent all day, or I can go show you some other spots where you can move your camps, find water, glass for sheep that I've had success with in the past. So we went off and did that. Came back that night, and I said, so in the morning, as agreed on, I'm leaving. And you guys are on your own. He was there with his girlfriend. And we're going to separate. So anyways, that morning we go separate ways, and it's just a heavy blanket of fog. So I walk out, I go through this notch in the mountain. It's like this little kind of secret little crack that you can slip through and save going like 3 kilometers around the mountain. So I slip through that. I go down this fog. I don't know where I am or if there's sheep around me. I'm just traveling in this weather. go down into another valley past a creek and go up into another whole mountain block. So like, big mountain range, and then you go down into a valley and cross and go into another one. So it's probably like 15 kilometers or 10 miles about from where I had been camped previously, and it's mid-morning now at this point. I'm sitting at the base of this waterfall, and there's like a grizzly feeding on the mountain behind me, and I see some sheep as the fog breaks up to my left, and but it's all ewes and lambs. And as I'm scanning the area, because you hunt mostly with your binos and your optics, I see way up like another 5 kilometers up this valley, I see some little white dots appearing in this folded kind of really the micro topography is like 5 meter fold, 10 meter bench, 5 meter. It's like really stepped, like the rice fields in some Asian countries like
Yeah,
this.
okay. Yeah.
And the sheep are kind of just appearing above me. So I can see that I'm in a waterfall kind of canyon. So I have great cover. Just there's some rules I keep in bow hunting, like especially for sheep. I never go on the skyline
Okay.
ever,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
the point where it's like you should almost I feel like physically kind of ill sensation if I'm on a pinnacle or if I'm on a ridge. So you'll never see me in a picture on the ridge. I'll always be down like 10 meters off the side, always hiding.
Yeah.
Um, and then I always keep the wind in my favor. I never break that rule intentionally, because it can swirl, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And then the other rule is I never stop in the open. Always have an exit plan.
Just be
It's
move
like,
through.
yeah, yeah. Get to cover, get to cover, get to cover.
Okay.
Because sheep pop out. The fog clears, or sheep walks around a cliff, and they have essentially 8 times bino. Like they can see you perfectly.
Wow.
It's I don't know if that can be proven, but like they can see very well.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
known to be very, very visually acute animal. See the So I don't stop where I don't have an exit strategy. So I'm in this kind of little hidey hole, glassing around, and they start to appear. And the first is like two or three. I can't remember exactly how many, but just a couple. And I'm like, oh God, okay, this is my chance. I got rams. I got tons of daylight left. Let's go. And then a little voice in the back of my head was like, dude, stop. What are you doing? Because I have this like intense
Yeah.
desire to just go, right? And often that can be a detriment, especially in sheep hunting. I talk myself down. I say, wait, 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 wait. Like I'm having an audible conversation with myself. Wait, wait, wait. When was the last time you saw all the sheep? I said to myself, and I'm having this conversation. So it goes on maybe 20 seconds, and I'm like, no, there always are more sheep. That's right. And then I'm going back and forth with myself like that over and over again. And I put my scope back up on them, and now there's more rams popping out. And boom, 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 boom. The whole hillside is lighting up with rams. And I can't get a good count on how many are there, but it's more than 20 and like less than 40. It's just huge rams, like massive rams. So I quickly put my phone scope on and take a photo of the biggest one. And then I'm just like, I'm in spectator mode, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
there's no way I can get to them.
Too many
So I
eyes.
stay in that little hole. Yeah. And if you imagine the bowl with a big clamshell, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So if I'm where you are on the computer, there's a big clamshell that comes down like this to where I am. And all these sheep are up on this high plateau looking down into this essentially clamshell auditorium.
So they can see
So
everything.
I'm on center stage, right in the center where they could see me. So
Okay.
I'm waiting, hiding in this hole. It's like some bushes, boulders, and a waterfall. I'm just hiding. Um, and I know that they're not going to stay there. They're going to, from the experiences I've had over a number of days in the mountains watching sheep, they are going to go and bed down in safety somewhere. And there's no safe space where we are right now. So I'm 100% confident that they're going to leave the bowl that I'm in. So I just wait. And at like 6 o'clock at night, so 5 or 6 hours later, they just feed off. And they go on this trail straight over the edge and into the cliffs. I know there's cliffs there because I've been there, 30 times myself into these cliffs. And but I'll preface this really quick. Earlier, I told you I don't have the same place twice, right?
Yes.
But that doesn't include these archery zones. Okay. So when I'm looking for a real adventure, I will fly in somewhere, hike in somewhere that I've never been before because it doesn't really matter if I get one. But with the bow hunting is like one really good spot. So I kind of go back there. So it's the one place that I kind of hold close to
Yeah.
myself, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been there a lot and I know this place and in the summer I hike in there and hang out. And I've been in, if somebody I know has a tag, I'll go in and spend time with them, just to get more exposure in there. So I knew they were there. I started boogieing as hard as I can up this waterfall creek, and I gained like another 3,000 feet of elevation to now where I'm in the cliffs high above them. And there's a small lake there, and it's probably like 20 feet by 50 feet, this lake. And there's a really kind of uh, one flat spot. And the lake comes off the top and just goes into a straight waterfall. And right on at the edge of the waterfall is this little flat spot. So that's where I camp. The reason I say that is because a good buddy of mine named Cole, who ends up being Rye's brother, those sheep killers I was telling you about, he got drawn later in his life after I did. And I showed him all these spots, and he put his tent right where I put mine, and he shot his ram like 200 yards from where I got mine.
Nice.
So it's just like such a perfect setup
Yeah.
because you have this like high cliff um, glassing spot with water and good wind that you can just be like this total like predator in your nest up there watching everything happen and then just strike when the moment's right. So I got up there, I glassed to make sure there was no sheep that didn't come back over the bowl, and I went around and made sure that I wasn't going to blow anything out. Went back to my tent, texted my wife right away and said, "Hey, I've got a really good chance. The Rams have gone into these cliffs that I know really well. At 3 in the morning, I'm going to get up in the dark because there's very little dark where we live in that time of year. It's like an hour and a half of dark at nighttime. I'm going to go and make a play on them. So I'll cross the big auditorium in the dark and get to the cliffs right at sunup. So I go and I go to bed, get up in the morning, go across the bowl in the dark. It's several kilometers back around. And as soon as the sun is coming up, I'm doing this thing called staircasing where, um, imagine a hill is like my hand here, right? And
Yeah.
I'm on this side because I don't want to be on the skyline.
Hmm.
So as I creep up, I can see just this part, and I creep up a little more, I can see down here, and then I creep up, I can see here.
So you're just
And
increasing your view just by a tiny bit each step.
a little bit, like an inch or two sometimes, or half of a bino width sometimes, because, excuse me, they can be just around the corner. Like when Greg shot his ram, I followed him in and they were right there at like 30 yards in a like hurricane wind coming at our face. I just crept around with one bino like this, and it was right there. And he's
Amazing.
like holding onto my bino harness like this. We're staying tight together, and I'm coming around with one bino like that, and they were right there.
Amazing.
And I was like, "They're here. Get your bow ready." He got it. So I go around. I'm staircasing, so I'm creeping up to the edge. I'm looking over, and quite often you have these kind of saddles that are, you know, have a low spot and two high spots. So you have to creep around like this. And you're going up to the skyline, looking around, coming down, going up the skyline, looking around, coming down, going up. Imagine doing 5 kilometers of a ridge line like that.
Wow.
Takes forever. It takes forever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't find them. And there's 30 or 40 of them together. So you'd think like you'd see the leg of one or the full body of 12 of them out on a ridge or something. You'd see something if they're there. So I'm like on my in reach, text my wife, I lost him. I lost him. She's like sending me all these encouraging messages. You can do it. Just keep doing, she knows the routine. And stick with it. You'll find them. They got to be there somewhere. We classically say they didn't get abducted by aliens. They'll be there somewhere. So I creep back up over the hill, and it's now like middle of the day, and I'm gonna eat some food because I've been up since 3:30. And I go to this boulder, and the boulder's like as big as a cinder block, and it's the only cover on the whole hillside, and it's got a couple little kind of spriggly branches of different shrub coming off of it. And I kind of just sit myself down there because I got the boulder and the shrubs, and then a little ledge like this to hide behind where the grass goes like this and folds down like stairs. Boom, like
Okay. Yeah.
goes out for 10 feet, drops a few feet, and then goes out 10 more feet. So it's kind of like a cascade of grass. And I'm sitting there, and the big banks of fog are coming and going, and I'm glassing everywhere. I can't see the sheep anywhere. I'm like, where did they go? They must be somewhere. Did I blow them out in the dark? Um, there's this really gnarly set of cliffs that's to the south of me that is impenetrable. Like there's no way you'd get them in there. Um, you would need like it would be full
Full
blown rock
climbing
climbing,
gear.
like
Yeah.
El
Yeah.
Capitan gear. Yeah, yeah. And then they have these like 2 foot wide trail ledges that go around the cliff. Like you'd never get them in a million years.
And even if you
And I'm
shot
thinking
it, it's
they,
gonna like throw itself off the cliff. And
yeah, it's a waste of everyone's time.
yeah.
So I'm freaking out a little bit that they're in there. And I start glassing, and I'm like, I'm not even gonna glass that area because if they're there, I'm not gonna expose myself to that spot to glass it.
Hmm.
And then so I look down in the bottom of the valley, way down in the willows where I had originally seen them from, and there's a wave of them coming up. They're down there. They're down in the very bottom of the valley. So they must have done some sort of circle around the whole mountain in the late evening and gone to some bluff and then bedded there and then went,
Yeah.
they did whatever they wanted to do. One thing I'll say is don't be surprised if you see sheep. Sheep go wherever they want. So you don't always see them in the top of the mountain, right? You quite often do, but don't be surprised when they're somewhere you didn't expect them to be because they really will go wherever they want. So they're coming up, but I'm kind of in a position where they look like they're going to go up maybe a couple kilometers away from me and get over the ridge. So I'm like, okay, they're going to these cliffs. They're going to those gnarly cliffs. I got to intercept them, but I'm at this boulder and I have to be strategic how I get away. So as the fog comes in, I scurry, I start to run. I'm like running, and it's like 200 yards to the cliffs, right?
Yeah.
And once I'm on the cliff, I can just go a couple kilometers south or a mile and a half south and intercept them. But I'll just be out of sight, kind of cruising the cliffs on the other side, out of sight. And just as I'm like 5 feet from those cliffs, the sun comes out and burns the fog off. And I'm out like a sore thumb. So I just hit the dirt. Boom. And all I can reach is my binos and my bow. And I'm just laying there on the ground. And the fog comes and they're like coming. Now they're coming right towards me. And they're like a couple 100 meters away because I've been pinned down for so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now the fog lifts and they're like 500 yards away, 300 yards away. And they're like on this little turtle shell, um, kind of a little pimple on the mountain, just sitting there in the center of this bowl on a ball.
So they're not heading where you thought
And
they were going. They actually come towards you.
eventually they went, I don't want to ruin it, but yeah, they come right back. And so I get down on my ground and I'm like, how am I going to get over the skyline without them seeing me? So I'm like trying to inch, it's not working. So I'm like, okay, I'll just roll. I'll just roll. And if I'll just keep my eye on them as I'm rolling. And if they're not looking, I'll keep rolling. So I roll, get a half a turn, and they don't see me. So I roll another half a turn and I'm back on my stomach and I reach over and kind of like just drag my bow towards the edge. And I do that like 10 times and I get to the other side of the cliff. So now I'm down in that cliff and it's taken me so long to get there. The sheep get up from their bed and they start walking back up the mountain. And they're essentially going right over the same spot where I saw them the previous day go over the cliff. And I'm like, holy moly, this is about to happen right here, right now. So anyways, they start coming and there's just this, I can't ever, there's so many of them, I can't see them all at the same time. Like it's just, some are behind a ledge, so I can't really tell if there's a big one or a small one I should be watching out for. I'm just looking for legal ones. I'm just glassing anyone that's legal. And I'm on that cliff, kind of shooting up over the skyline, and they're on the other side of the skyline. and the they're kind of making their way up, and they're like 20 yards away from me. And it's like five of them go by, not there's an illegal one, and then finally there's like a legal one there. I don't know if it's the same one I got or not. Like they're so close, I'm not really able to get a good look at them for very long. I'm just like put my binos up for a second. Okay, he's legal. Um, and so I come back and I got my bow ready, and I'm at full draw, and I'm kind of slipping in the rocks because it's such a steep hill that I'm on.
Okay.
And I'm going to shoot, and he's right there at 20 yards. It's like a slam dunk. And I go to shoot. And as I'm shooting, I slip down the hill and I just drop myself like that, like an eighth of an inch down.
Oh,
And my arrow comes off my bow and goes right under his chest, like 3 inches below his chest.
oh,
But my longbow is so quiet and the wind is howling so hard, they don't even know. The arrow goes off into the archaeological record somewhere, and it's gone forever. Um, they don't even know. I put another arrow on. They don't know I'm there. They can't hear me. I'm hidden really well in these kind of cliffy. Uh, I'm really well hidden. They don't even jump when the arrow goes by. They just keep walking. So I go to draw again and I start sliding again, and I'm like, this is not happening. I can't. I won't kill one this way. So I waited for all of those rams to go by me. Every single one, just right there, 20 yards.
oh.
I'm like, this is some. But as they walk by me, they take a little bit of a right-hand turn and get on to the ledge that's directly below that boulder that I was just parked at a few hours ago. So I'm like, I'm waiting for that last one to get underneath the ledge, and I'm gonna run like Usain Bolt over there and get on that boulder because they're gonna walk right to it. And
Y-
they're pointed right at it. Like it's like perfect lined up. I can see they're going right for it. So as soon as that last one went over, I got down in the low sneak. I'm like bent over, running as fast as I can with my bow in one hand. And I'm looking, I can see their backs. They're like paralleling me, and it's blowing so hard they can't hear me. But I'm also in pretty thick, lush grass, so I'm quiet already.
yeah.
I'm just boogieing up the mountain right next to them, and I'm like, I'm passing this five, and I'm going by that one, and I'm catching them, and I'm getting out in front, and then I'm like 50 meters in front of the whole big band of rams, and I could just see like one of their butts and one of their horns that comes up above their head. So like I can just see like the top inch of every sheep,
Okay.
and there's just a sea of them coming towards me. And this is like when I made the decision that I think what killed my sheep is I picked the side that I was going to shoot from, and I said I'm not moving.
Yeah.
I put
Okay.
my bow out. I put my bow out where I could shoot one, and then I just held it there. And I said, when that sheep walks in front of my bow, I'm going to shoot it because all of them were going to come up right in front of me.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's maybe 5 minutes and the sheep are coming, and it's maybe 10 minutes now and they're coming towards me. And I'm starting to see more of their bodies, and they're very close. I can hear them. I can hear their breathing. They're right there. It's like they're right there. Like my shot was probably 20 yards when I shot, but they were probably like only 5 yards away from me on the other side of that boulder when they came around the step and stepped up onto the next ledge. And I'm sitting there, and the first ram is way too small, and the second ram is pretty close. It might have been legal. And then out of the corner of my eye, just to my right, another ram comes up, and he's like a massive one, and it's legal, but he's like right here. I never would have got turned over my right shoulder to shoot him because my bow hand's at my left, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm just hoping that he doesn't see me. Excuse me, sorry. I'm hoping that he doesn't see me. Those two other rams are like right next to me in the on the hillside. And I just see this like huge set of horns coming. Like not I couldn't see the whole horns, but I could see like the base where it's on the top of their head, like not where it touches their skin, but just above the base where it comes back. And I was like, okay, this one looks bigger. It's just like the whole horn itself was bigger,
Yeah.
just much more massive, I would say. And it's coming, and I'm like, okay, this might be it. This might be it. So it comes, it steps up onto the same ledge that I'm on, and it's all grassy ledges. And he's just standing there perfectly broadside. His horns are perfectly lined up into the shot. I take my binos out as slowly as I can and I just look and see that he's over his nose. I'm like, okay, he's legal. put my bino back because I really don't want that bino to hit my string. And he takes like another step out. Now he's like right in view. I can see that other ram just right next to me is kind of like gently feeding with no idea I'm there. And I'm like in this little boulder shrub bush kind of thing. I come back, hit my anchor, and I just see that arrow come off my bow, man. And I smoked him. And I was like, the emotion that you feel in that moment, I'm feeling it right now. Uh, it's like, oh, dude, I don't even know how to talk about it, but it is so hard to be alone for that long, like 150 days or more. Like I could look in my records how many days it took me, but like, think about being alone for 100 days on the mountain in the rain, snow, blowing wind. Maybe in those 150 days, there's been five other chances where I could have killed one and it didn't happen. And then 30 other or 40, like way more than you ever deserve to have chances where they're 40 yards away, but you can't shoot that far because it's too windy and you got a longbow.
Yeah.
So it's like all of that trial and all of that energy just comes out of your body in that moment, right? So then I watch that arrow hit him. He runs, and the other rams look to see why he's running. They like look and see. They turn their heads, all of them, and look. And I pick up my binos and I look, and I see like what looks like a big spray of blood coming out.
As he's still running. Okay.
I got him right in the heart. I think I got him right in the heart, and the arrow kicks out. I'm like offside shoulder, right in the heart. The blood is spraying. I'm gonna have a dead ram. And I put my binos down. This is like in a series of seconds. I put my bino down. And when I put my binos down, all the rams are watching their friend or whatever they call each other run off. And they look back because they're like, nothing happened. Why is he running? They look back and see me kneeling there now because I got my binos up. They see me leaning there, and all 30 of those rams are like, what the? And just explode off the mountainside. Because I came out of cover to see what happened, what the shot
Yeah,
looked
yeah,
like.
yeah.
So I text my wife on the inReach. I text Bert who made me the bow. I'm like, I text my buddy Travis. I say, you're not gonna believe it, but ram down. I got a ram. I just shot a ram. And of course they're like, what did he look like? How far was the shot? And it's like an inReach. I don't know if you've ever been on one, but
Yeah,
there
yeah.
it's like
Too
And so
slow.
I'm like, just give me time, just give me time. And that's like probably at noon, eh?
Yeah.
So I wait about 45 minutes or so, thinking heart shot. I saw the blood spraying out of him. His front leg is covered in blood, and he's gonna be dead right here. So I'll just give him some time. First thing I would do, I would say, somebody shoots a sheep with a gun or anything, just eat some food right away
Yes,
because
good
it
idea.
could potentially get to be pretty. You could rapidly have some intense moments, and you're gonna want some food because you might put your backpack down and not have food for a while. The So anyways, I eat some food. I then go try to follow him. I find the arrow. I find his tracks, and there's no blood. I'm like, what the hell happened here? There's no blood. So anyways, I follow that track for a while, and there's like a speck here, like a kernel of rice side speck here and there,
Yeah.
but pretty pronounced imprints in that soft mountain, like that alpine grass, that moss. Boom, boom, where he's running. And I follow it for like about 2 kilometers, all the way back around the mountain. And there's no blood and there's no dead sheep. And I'm like, what happened? And ultimately, I'll tell this. Okay, I'll say what happened. So I keep following the trail
Yeah.
and I get to where a kind of isolated island of cliffs are that are disconnected from all the mountains around them. And I'm like, if I was a sheep and I just got that spooked, that's where I would be going. I'd be headed for this pinnacle where I can see everything. So I sneak up on that thing like a shadow, like never seen somebody sneak slower. Like I took as much time as humanly possible to sneak up on that thing. And I get there and there are 7 rams bedded on it. And I'm looking at each and every one of them through this crack in a boulder and I position it. And I could see them right there, like 20 yards away from me. And none of them have a little blood spot on their right side. I'm like, my ram's not here. How's that possible? The tracks lead right up to here. And then your next thought is, oh, he's dead and has fallen.
Oh,
So I start to take more risk and look out, and I'm looking out and he's not there. So I look around instead of looking through that crack in the boulders. I go around it to the left side and there's a huge horn sticking out. And I'm like, oh my God, he's right there. And the wind is like blowing me back from the cliff. I come around that boulder with my bow full draw and he steps out. And I see the little red spot on his side and a little bit of blood on his leg. And I'm like, that's mine. I come back full draw, put the arrow right. I just stare right into his rib cage, and the arrow comes off my bow, right through his lungs. Runs off. Sorry, I have a little bit of tickle in my throat
it's
here.
okay. Take a minute.
The I've been battling this cold for so long, it's just kind of bothering my throat.
Yeah.
But anyways, he runs off and goes down this bouldery shale and up onto a cliff. Ultimately, he did die up on that cliff. But now I got to go get him, and it's like so I hike. I'm like, okay, he's up on the cliff. He's got an arrow through his lungs. I'm gonna hike back. It's like, I don't know if you've been following the math, but it's forever in a way back to where my tent is now.
Yeah, yeah.
Like probably estimate probably 10 or 12 kilometers back to where my tent is. I pack my tent up, find my arrow that I shot under the first one on my way
Oh,
back
you did.
because I cut the bowl. Yeah, I cut around the bowl,
Yeah.
pack up my tent, come back around. The one thing when he went up onto the cliffs, I saw the blood pouring out of either side of him and just painting the rocks. So I knew I had him.
Yeah.
But the cliffs are so textured with caves and ledges and everything that if I was to uh, be above them, I'd never find them. So I hike down, go all the way back around the mountain, almost all the way back to where I left my buddy Greg, put my stuff about halfway back to where Greg was, climb up onto the mountain that looks back at the mountain that he's on, and find him on the mountain. Then I go back, climb up over above him with nothing but my backpack and a knife and my bow, come down the cliffs on top of him, get him from the cliffs. And he had died on like the last inch of land right above like a 300-foot drop.
Oh,
So I inch him back to safety and look to see where that first shot was, and I had just nicked the hide on his brisket. What I
oh,
thought was blood spraying out was like a little piece of skin that was hanging down, like a little tag of hide.
oh,
So he didn't even know he was hit, right?
that's wild.
So I was pretty lucky that the second stock on him paid off.
Yeah. I mean, to
Yeah.
put two stalks in on an animal, especially when it's been shot once.
Yeah. I'll say that was like the culmination of hundreds of attempts and uh, a level of focus that I don't think I've ever had before because it was like, no one's taking this from me now.
Yeah.
I'll go to the end of the earth and get this one.
Yeah.
So I had brought my camp down below him. I got a couple quick photos because it was pretty precarious spot where I was. Texted my wife after the whole ordeal and said, hey, I got him. But by the time I had transferred everything back and forth, it was like 6 p.m. now when I finally got to him. So I got him off the edge, um, drug him over to where it was safe, where there was some less steep terrain, and pushed him down the less steep terrain. And he went down kind of a real gradual gravel hillside. We call it like shale or scree in the
Yeah.
mountains.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
kind of what the term we use. Some people who haven't seen it before, but it's like really small rocks. He went down there, so it didn't damage his horns or his hide or anything. And then I processed him down there, got everything squared away, and made my hike back to where I had stashed my camp and everything because I was going to pack it all out.
Yeah.
So as I'm like 3/4 of the way back to my camp along this 3 kilometer valley, um, that grizzly that I had seen the days before, I seen it up eating, and I was like, that bear's gonna smell this sheep in a minute. I better try and scare it away. And I don't have a gun. I don't have, I could have carried a rifle, but I couldn't probably physically have carried a rifle. I
Okay, yeah.
legally can have one, but I don't have a gun on this hunt. So all I have is a can of bear spray and my bow and a pretty nice sized grizzly anyways, but
How
it,
far away,
I,
roughly?
oh, 600 meters away.
Okay, yeah.
So I go, hey, bear, hey, I try to scare it away. The second I made a noise, the bear turned and ran down the mountain right towards me. And it proceeded to follow me in like 40 to 30 yards away from me, just weaving back and forth across the trail, trying to head me off, but I was just boogieing in front of it. So I ran up and grabbed my stuff. I tried to scare the bear away. Now I'm packing all my stuff back. I get back to where the ram is. And the ram, where I had cleaned it was in like a little opening that was probably 30 meters wide. And I just sat there with my bow ready and my bear spray ready. And I was like, that bear is gonna come, and I'm just gonna have to shoot this grizzly. It would have been legal to shoot that bear where I was.
If you're defending your, uh,
No, no, I have a tag for it.
oh, you have a tag.
You
Okay,
can hunt them. They're
yeah.
huntable animals here. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I got myself set up, and I'm like, I already got one arrow that just went into the mountainside, one arrow that deflected off its brisket, and one arrow that went through its rib cage. So I've got like one arrow or two arrows left that are usable here. So I'm sitting there waiting, and I can see the willows all moving around, and it's like trying to figure out what I am, and it's not coming in. So a big thunderstorm comes, and it's like just buckets of water are coming down. I'm like, I got to get out of here. I'll freeze to death because I can't stand out here in the middle of the elements for all night. So I put my pack on, and I got my full pack. I have the full sheep meat, and I have the head, and I start hiking out of there. But the bear is on the main game trail. So I'm like in the willows, climbing through these willows. Anyways, I realized pretty quickly I wasn't gonna make it all the way. It's like 15 kilometers to my vehicle,
Yeah.
and it's like 6:37 at night. So I took a little bit of a detour and hiked back up into the mountains, like high in the Alpine. And kind of, if you imagine the mountain's edge is like a wedge and the wind is coming directly at the wedge, it banks off and goes to the left or right and splits. So the bear was on the left split of the wind. So I just packed that ram and all my stuff as far as I could up to the right
Yeah. Okay.
and ditched it where the wind wouldn't blow the scent of it to him. And then bombed off those cliffs and caught the trail and went to my truck. Got home, get to the parking lot, and Greg's truck is there. And I'm like, what the hell is Greg doing here? So I just say, okay, he must be hunting. So I blast home and have a quick shower, put on a new fresh set of all like pants, shirt, everything. Um, and when I get back to cell service in Whitehorse, a few hours later, my cell phone go ding, and it's Greg saying, "Hey, your wife told me you got a ram. I'm on my way in to help pack it out."
Oh,
And I'm like, dude. So I'm nervous now, right? Because he doesn't know where I am. That bear's at the
there's a grizz
carcass where
walking
the bones
around.
are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a quick shower, put my clothes on, stopped at Tim Hortons, which is a Canadian staple, and then drove right back out there. And we went in and got that. And then I intercepted him on the mountain. I saw them up on a trail, and I went up and got met up with him and his girlfriend. We went down, grabbed the meat, packed it out, and then yeah, I had my ram. Do you want to see what he looks like?
Yeah, man.
Okay, yeah, I
I would
brought him
love
here.
it. I'm sure you have some pictures. I'll put some pictures on social if you don't mind. That would be great. Whoa, look at that thing.
So you can see when I line the horns up for you,
Yeah.
the tip of the horn has to go above the eye, where the bottom of the eye crosses the nose. Oh, I
Yeah.
don't got it right. There it
No, I
is.
see
So
it. It's way
he's
above.
so about right
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
legal.
Yeah.
So, and he was 10 years old. He's in the top, 50 ever taken with a bow.
A bow
And
or a trad bow?
I don't know what he would be for trad bow, but all bows. All
Wow.
bows.
Okay.
Um, and then what else? We're probably going on a long time here,
No,
but
it's good. It's
anyways,
good though. I'm enjoying it.
we got back to the truck, we packed everything up, head back to town, and I'm like, Greg, you did me a solid there coming in and help me pack it out. Um, I still have like 6 or 7 days of leave that I can go hunting instead of doing what my original plan was to go caribou hunting. Why don't we go back in and try and get you a ram? So we went back in. Um, I brought my dog this time, so we had a little buddy with us. And then that day we went blasting back up into those impenetrable cliffs that I had talked about. And we
Okay.
sat right on the edge of them because I assumed that all the rams had gone in there and then we're gonna
Come out.
when the mountain ride side came back to equilibrium and peace, they were gonna piddle their way back out. And we're just sitting there, and sure enough, like 8 rams appear up on the cliffs right above the impenetrable fortress of cliffs. And I said to Greg, I was like, those rams right there we can kill, but they're as far away from where I want to pack one out as you can. They were like probably, if I was to estimate, they're probably like 25 kilometers from our truck.
Wow. Okay.
And I had packed one out that far before on my own, but it took me 2 days. It it's so physically challenging that it changes who you are for the rest of your life. It's like it's that hard.
Yeah.
But with he and I together, I thought, we got it. So I said, that's as far as I ever want to pack one out. He's like, he looked at me and he said, I'll never. He said something to me that I've thought before. He said, if we don't go, I may never get one. And I was like, well, then we're going. You know, it's decided. And so we waited for the last ram to go out of sight, and we just got on our horse and started boogieing as hard as we could. I mean, figuratively,
Yeah.
horse. We
Yeah.
didn't have
Yeah.
a horse, but yeah, the figure of speech. Got over there as hard as we could push. We got like 80 feet from the skyline, and my dog at the time was very well trained. Since the baby's come, he's kind of completely lost all of his training, but he stays right on heel. And he doesn't make any noise. Um, so I said to Greg, Finnegan, that's the dog, he'll be right next to me. You just we'll put our backpacks down. You grab my bino harness with your left hand or your right hand. I can't remember. It doesn't matter, but you just hold on to me and I'll staircase up this ledge. And if those rams are there, I'll see them and then we'll make a plan. So I skitterbug up there. I see them like I was telling you earlier.
Yeah.
And I see like 5 rams right below us, but there aren't any like noticeably big ones there. But I can hear boom, boom, this sound. And I'm like, there's 2 rams fighting somewhere here. We just got to find those ones. So I start doing that same thing and creep around every boulder. And there's like boulders in there the size of a house, and there's boulders in there the size of a fridge. And we're like weaseling our way through every gap. Greg's just like right with me, like talking in my ear. He's like watching our left and right, and I'm just like so focused on my binos, just like trying to find these sheep. We can smell them. Finnegan is like got his hair on it, and he's like, something's here, Dad. Something's here. Something's here. Like he's like, I can hear him drawing in the air. He's a scent hound. I can just hear him pulling that air in, like breathing the whole mountainside in. I'm like, Greg, they're here. Just let's go slow. Let's go slow. And I look and creep up. I just see the back of one right there, like 40 yards away. And I like creep another inch or two forward. Boom, there's another back, and they can't see our head. So I start looking at the hillside, and there's like this one little kind of like grave, like a perfect 6 foot by 6 foot slot that we can fall into. And then that'll give us cover, and Greg can just wait and draw just like a pit blind.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's like one of those on the top of a mountain.
Perfect.
Flip into that, and those rams fighting, bang, 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 bang. And I'm like, this might be the perfect chance to like videotape an archery sheep hunt. So I just take my phone out and put it on play, and I'm ranging them, and I can see the one is way bigger than the other. I say to Greg, I'm like, Greg, the one on the right is like very legal and huge. And he's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, draw your bow. So he draws his bow, and I'm like, okay, now you stand up. And as soon as you stand up from kneeling, you're gonna have the shot. He's the one on the right. So he comes back, he's shooting a compound. I'm like, I range it. I say 45 yards or something like that. It's close, right?
Yeah.
And shoots, and the arrow goes right over its back.
Oh.
And I'm like, we just instantly both of us go whoop, down into that little pit blind. And I'm like, what'd you shoot it for? He says, I think I shot it for 55. I said, no, I think it was 45. I think I said 50. We're going back and forth. Right? I'm
Okay.
like,
Okay.
no, no, it's 45. It's 45. I got it on video. This whole conversation, I can't remember, but anyways, he draws his bow. He's in the pit blind and he comes up again. And I'm like, you see him? He's like, yeah. I'm like, don't shoot him in the horn because he's kind of got his head turned a little bit. Like when they hit each other's heads, they
Yeah.
go like this and they show each other their horn.
Okay. Yeah.
You
So
see?
they like do a
And they
side
turn their
turn.
head a bit,
Yeah.
just a little bit, like a 30% turn. And they're like, you see that? And they show it off. And then they'll go back to normal. And then they'll hit again. And then they show each other. And that horn is back. And I'm like, just wait, just wait. And he's like, okay. And the horn comes out of the way. And that arrow comes out of that bow like the most perfect thing you've ever seen in your life. Oof. Right through that ram center of the body. I'm like, Greg, first archery hunt, first sheep hunt. I said, dude, you just did what nobody has done. So we let the rams run off and all eight of them blast off the mountain and go together. And I'm looking at every single one, like, okay, you got the big one, you got the big one. And I'm like, I'm happier for him than I was for myself. I'm like, dude, you just got a giant ram. It's humongous. And I'm just like, oh, like so excited for him. And I'm like, but here's the deal. In these cliffs, we got to give him time.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not going to even go remotely close to those cliffs until we know he's dead, dead. So, anyways, we gave him like 5 hours. I'm like, Greg wants to go. I'm like, no, no, let's just give it another half an hour. Let's just give it another half an hour. Like, just please, 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 God, let this ram be dead just over the hill. But
Yeah. Better safe.
anything can happen. Just let's just give it time. Let's just give it time. The angle, it could have moved. These angles, angles, angles. I'm like, just give it time. There's blood everywhere on the hillside. We go to track the ram. It's like we waited so long that it's now starting to get dark. And I'm like, okay, if we don't go now, we're going tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we skitterbug down those rocks where the rams were bedded. And Finnegan, I put him on the leash now because we're in the cliffs, and he's like pulling on that leash, right? He's only a 30-pound dog. He's a small little dog, like looks like a little poodle. And he's pulling on the leash, and I'm like, what's going on, Finnegan? Get back over here. And he's like hanging onto the hillside like you can't imagine. And I go over and I'm like, what? And he's just following that blood trail perfectly. Like, little blood up to a big swath of blood. I'm looking at Greg. I'm like, buddy, you just got yourself a ram. It's dead for sure. So we go up over the hill and there's like this big boulder cascade. And I'm like, the heart sunk a little bit because it could be anywhere. We're
Yeah.
losing light.
Okay.
I'm like, Greg, let's just follow the blood. He's gonna be there. He's going downhill. He's going downhill. Sure enough, he's right there. And he only went like another 100 yards away from us,
Amazing.
including the downhill. I get down to this ram and it's like so huge and so big. The base is so big, they've grown together. They're so massive. It's like
Whoa.
loops way down low and comes up and flares out wide. I'm just like, dude, that is the ram of 10 lifetimes. And he's just like, are you sure it's legal? Like, and I'm like, dude, this one here, there is no doubt about this one. So, anyways, it's now dark. I've cut it all up. We put it on our backs. We start climbing out of the mountain. We get like halfway back to camp, and the dog can't walk anymore. And I can't carry the dog because it's too much weight with the sheep and all the hunting gear and everything. So I'm like, Greg, we left our tents like 10 kilometers away from here. We can't kill the dog. Do you have a thermal blanket that you can put over yourself and we can sleep right here on the mountainside? So we just did that. We climbed down into a little ball and just cuddle puddle on the mountain and waited for the sun to come up and warm us up. And I'll never forget funniest thing. I had a bivy style thermal blanket and his is just the regular. And the wind's blowing so hard. I see him, he's like got that blanket pulled down over his neck like this, trying to stay warm. And the rest of the 9/10 of it are up in the air, just flapping in the breeze like this. So we made it. We got back to camp, and I think that season I did 13 trips in and out of that mountain range, packing camp and sheep out. But we finally got his ram out. We put them next to each other, and it was just like such an amazing moment. Yeah,
That is such an amazing story, man.
yeah.
To get
And then
two. Oh,
yeah, two in a week, and then like
Both archery.
the
Bonkers.
percentage is like a 10% chance. So they give out 10 tags, and usually one guy gets one.
Yeah.
And I had been up there previously when I got drawn, and I did 22 days and didn't get one. And that's from like all the way into 3 feet of snow in October, still hunting them. So it can go, you can get one easy, or you can get one, or you cannot get one at all. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's just as likely, it's just time. But then, yeah, fast forward a year, my buddy Cole gets drawn, and he put his tent right where mine was, and he shot his like 200 yards from where I got mine.
That's bonkers, man.
And his is like a whole another level, like even way bigger than Greg and mine. Like,
Really?
it's great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. His is like huge.
Wow.
Yeah. So like in sheep, like 40 inches is kind of like people say it's like a 400-inch bull, or no, do they say 300 for elk or something like that? Or,
I'm not sure. I think I've heard of
with caribou,
400, but the biggest ones, yeah, 300 is like the standard, right?
yeah, yeah, that's like that's what you want. When you're looking for a mature one, you want a 300-inch bull. And like to get a 40-inch ram is like getting a 400, like a
Wow.
380-inch bull.
Yeah,
It's like you get one or two in your life.
it's a big boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is
So,
such an epic story, man.
yeah. So anyways, now we're back, and I'll probably get drawn this year.
Got to do it all again, I guess.
You're gonna go again. Yeah. And I'm just, I want to show my boy. I wrote a story about it, and then I made him an email, and I wrote him a story of like what my life was like leading up to trying to get a sheep,
Yeah,
like what each hunt was like and what I learned along the way. And I sent him an email that to an email account I made for him, so when he's older he can check it out.
that's a cool idea.
And like I really wanted to show him that like sooner or later he's gonna think his dad's a loser and that I'm like just some guy that enforces the rules. But at one time I was a wild man too,
Oh, there's no
you
doubt
know?
about that. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about
So I
that,
just
man.
wanted to share that with him.
Yeah. But
I
you
want to share it with
also
him,
you also wrote that story as an article, right, for a magazine. Is that right? Is that the same?
Yeah.
Is that the same story? So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
A magazine that you read, if I understand correctly. Is it? What's the magazine called?
So I kind of always had this goal when I was young. There's this magazine called Traditional Bowhunter Magazine. And growing up reading it, there was like a couple kind of key players in that magazine. And I thought, one day I'm going to do something that I think is worthy of going in that magazine. So maybe I would write a story about mule deer that I've killed with my bow, or whitetails, or like a bear or something. But I thought I really want to submit a story one day that's like, you know, something that really means something, like a real substantial story. And I thought, if I ever get a sheep, I will write a story and submit it to them and see if they would accept it. So, anyways, I wrote the story, and they accepted it. And yeah, so it's not a very big magazine, but it's one that I hold close to me because I read it a lot growing up.
Yeah.
And then yeah, there was like a couple things that happened when I was young. Like you asked me how I got into traditional archery. And we had like three channels in the Yukon when I was a kid, and they used to have this show called Double Bull Archery. I don't know if you remember it,
Mm-mm,
but
no.
Brooks Johnson was in that show, and it was the guys who made the pop-up blinds way back in the 90s. And they used to have this show called Double Bull Archery, and Brooks Johnson was a young guy that shot a recurve. And I used to think that was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal, right? So yeah, those are kind of that, and that traditional bow hunter magazine really pushed me to really want to hunt with a traditional bow.
That's got to be a
Oh.
pretty epic moment in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So they give you a couple copies, and I gave them away to my good buddies that I hunt with and have hunted sheep with. And then I kept a few copies here for Sonny when he's older.
Yeah, that's wicked.
Yeah.
I wonder if
Yeah.
people can see it online or buy it. Maybe, maybe we could
Yeah,
like find
there's
a link to the what volume it is or what
for
edition.
sure, for sure.
That'd be good.
Um, I'll say this, like I probably went on a lot more than I did in the story,
Okay.
because it's like
Yeah, it's a
they keep you confined to a
different format.
certain
Yeah.
amount. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the other thing I really like about documenting it is I'm a firm believer that your how you recall things you lose parts of stuff over time.
Definitely.
So recording these podcasts or writing that email to my boy or the magazine article is my way of saving myself from forgetting about it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think part, as you were saying, like part of starting this podcast and kind of when I'm off on big hunts, documenting things as I go, it is true. It's so good. It's such a good way of like
Yeah.
remembering things, and it cements in your mind better. The memory just gets sealed better, right? Like, so
Yes.
spending 25 to 30 days in the mountains in Colorado chasing elk and moose, but
Yeah.
like doing voice notes as I'm going the whole time and then editing that into like a big story. I
Oh,
mean,
that's so dope.
yeah, it was kind of cool to have that, right? And I know that in 30 years I can listen back to that and be back there again.
I
So
kind of always thought that would be fun to do on a hunt. Like I never have done that, but that would be a fun way to do it. Like make that voice memo thing like you're talking about.
yeah, just
Because you
like
have your phone
standard
with
thing on
you.
your phone. It's actually the quality's it's fine, it's good enough,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's a big
No,
job
it's
to
fun.
edit. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's a big job.
Well, AI is coming.
Oh,
AI
true.
is coming.
That's true.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not even
Yeah.
that's not. Let's worry about it later then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just hope people enjoy the story.
Oh man,
Um,
yeah. There's no way. There's no
yeah,
way they won't enjoy that story. That's just not many people
yeah.
get to experience that, dude.
No, I'm very lucky. My wife's really been supportive. I I'm lucky that I live in a place where it's possible to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
man.
know,
I
it's
mean,
still
incredible.
possible for us to go get on the land here.
Yeah, man. It's amazing. So I feel like we've chatted for quite a while now, but I have a long list of a bunch of other things that I had in mind as well to ask you about. Other stories that I've kind of heard in different places that you've told. But I feel like maybe if you wouldn't mind jumping back on at some point in the future,
Yeah.
I would love to get you back, man. I'd love to hear more.
What I would say is, why don't we go through the process of getting you into a bow?
Yeah.
And then we can share some stories. And maybe when I'm talking about what broadhead I choose to pick and why, I can tell you a story that why I did that.
Yeah, that's good. That'd be
That
awesome.
might be a good way to do it.
Great idea. And then
I mean,
I'm accountable as well. I got to get that bow.
yeah, I'll say this, there's a lot of people who have killed a lot more stuff than I have with their traditional bow.
Hmm.
So maybe there's somebody who would, I just this is my story.
Yeah.
Somebody else probably has a better story or more accomplished story, but that's their story. This is just my story.
It doesn't have to be one or the other, man. You've got some great stories,
Yeah.
and I want to hear them. And I'm sure everybody else wants to hear them too. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing them today.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad we got to connect. It was pretty pretty exciting to finally get to connect.
Yeah. So is there anywhere, this little part, is there anywhere where you would love to send people to follow you or check out something, or are you just under the radar? What's the deal?
I'll say I kind of expect this question in almost all
Yeah. Yeah.
these kind of interactions, but this is my thing. I used to try and be on social media and things like that, but what I found was I was having kind of artificial relationships that were almost getting in the way of my real relationships. So I've really worked hard to condense my life down to like the 5 or 6 key people that really matter
Hmm.
to me
Yeah.
and who I can directly help and change their life and be positive in their life. People can look me up on Instagram. It's just Adam Brennan or something like that on Instagram.
I'll put a link.
But
Yeah.
if you look me up or you don't, it doesn't matter to me.
No, I've seen as well. You post, there's a post on there where you're like, hey, it's another year since I last posted. Just checking in. I'm alive.
Yes. Yeah. So, I used to post a lot and then too many people calling me or messaging me asking me about what bow they should buy or what arrows they should get or hey, does my form look good? And then shoot a deer on their archery hunt with a rifle on their first day. So I'm like, I can't give the world all my time. I got a family and some close friends that I really want to commit my life to.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
that's a sound logic, man. It's good.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
dude,
Well, thank you for having me, man.
no, thank you. Thanks for jumping on. That was epic. I'm really glad to have heard that story and well, heard the whole journey that got you to that point as well.
Yeah.
But good luck
Long
with
road.
oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, it makes everything better at the end, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like we
So what's
said,
next?
yeah, what's next,
What's
man?
next? I'm gonna try and do what happens is when somebody does something that they thought wasn't like I never thought I was gonna get one.
Yeah.
So it was easy for me to always keep going because it was unattainable. And but then when you get one, it's like, well, I don't want to fall victim of this, like losing my drive.
Yeah, it's tough.
So as soon as I got him, I'm like, what's next for me? I would like to have four sheep with my bow.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
to like, the kind of the slam, but I'll
Oh,
never be able to afford
the
it.
four different kinds of sheep, right?
No. I just want to get four of any species.
Okay. Okay.
Like if it's four dolls, I don't mind
Mm-hmm.
because I'll never be able to afford three of the four anyway. So
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely
yeah,
a different kind of game. That's for sure. I
yeah,
feel the same.
yeah. So my suggestion is if you can't make enough money to go buy hunts, move somewhere where you can get a tag.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's sound advice, man. That's definitely on my
yeah.
horizon at some point, I think.
You guys have bighorns in California, right?
I
But it's
actually,
like a
yeah, I
billion years
think
to draw
so.
one,
I
right?
think so. Yeah, I think you can draw them, but like, good luck.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think I've
Yeah,
put in for a few years, but I'm not. Yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll be in
I hear you.
America, but maybe we'll be over in South Africa a bit more. So, but there's opportunities over there as well. Like I said, there's Barbary sheep over there too. So that could be a different kind of adventure.
Yeah, well, if somebody's looking for an adventure, any sort of mountain goat species, the capra species in Asia, the hunts are cheap and the country is unbelievably wild.
Really?
I've not been, but it's definitely something I would pursue if we didn't have sheep hunting as like I have here.
Wow. Okay, that's good to know. I'll have to pick your brains
Yeah.
about that at some point.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've never been, but I just dream.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
nothing happens unless you dream. So
exactly. Right on. Well, thanks for having me, man.
cool, man. Thanks, dude. Right, that's another episode done and dusted. Thank you again, Adam. That was a great conversation. I had a lot of fun actually going back and listening through to that again while I was doing the edit. A lot of useful tips, some mind-blowing conversations that I can only dream of having something similar in my life. I don't know if I have the talent or the time to achieve it, but fingers crossed it'll happen one day. Again, if you've got this far in the conversation in the podcast episode, then I'm going to take that as a compliment. Thank you. It would be amazing if you could do all the things that people who love podcasts do. If you could give us a follow, subscribe, share with a friend. If you could leave a nice review, that's always super helpful. Yeah, all those things will help push this podcast out further into the world and actually give me more opportunities to talk to more interesting people like Adam. So if you happen to know someone who you think has some great stories out in the wilderness, then feel free to send them my way because it's always appreciated. Right, that's it for now. Thanks for listening, everyone. And until next time.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch.